Sorry, you guys. Okay.
You sure don't want me to attempt to get it going?
Are we not on the radio right now?
Not yet.
Welcome to the conferencing service. Please stand by. The conference operator will be with you momentarily. If you require assistance during the conference, press the star followed by the 0 on your telephone.
There's that music.
Thank you for standing by. May I have your first and last name, please?
Yes, hello, this is Deborah Thompson. I'm Borough Clerk for Petersburg. I'm also here in the room with Mayor Jensen and Assembly Members Lynn, Mucci, and Norheim.
Okay, perfect. Just a quick recap for the call. There's no introduction, right? I'm just going to do a countdown for you.
That's correct.
Okay, and there will be a Q&A at the end?
No, not necessarily a Q&A. There is a part of the agenda where the public does have time to speak, but it's not necessarily a back and forth. It's just a giving, providing input.
Okay, but is that through the participant line or just a speaker line?
I'm not sure which is which, so they will call in on 0633 in order to provide their views, and I ask you one at a time to unmute them. I let you know who to unmute when.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, this is my first time doing your call, so I wasn't quite sure how you wanted to proceed.
Yes, no problem. No problem.
Okay.
It would be the speaker line because we are the participants.
You're in the speaker. You'll be put in the speaker line, but you have the ECD up.
No, I'm trying to get that up right now, so I'm hurrying to do that.
Okay, so I'm showing 1 minute past start time. You'll let me know when you want me to open the lines?
Yes, do we have other assembly members on the line?
Yes, you have quite a few.
Okay.
Do you want me to join you right now to them?
Please.
Okay, I will join you to them. I'm going to do a standby for the participants, and I will come back to you shortly.
Thank you.
Perfect. Ms. Thompson, the standby has been done. Now let me know when you want to begin.
Thank you, I'm almost there.
No problem.
Operator, your name is,
Lori.
Lori? Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen.
Ms. Thompson, will you be using the chat on the ECD?
Probably not, maybe a little, but probably not much.
Okay, I do have another operator standing by for that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm finally there.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor Jensen, whenever you are.
Do we need to get what other assembly members are on the line?
I am looking right now. Let's see. We have.
We're all on here, Debbie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kelsey, Dave, and Jay. They're all there.
Okay. So, operator, are you going to do a countdown?
Yes, I will. So I will count 5, 4, and then 3, 2, 1 will be silent for you. You'll have to count it out, okay?
Okay, you ready, Clerk Thompson? Okay, yeah, can we proceed?
All right, 5, 4.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It is a regular assembly meeting on November 16th, 6 p.m. So will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Jeb,
Here.
Bob.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a full assembly this evening with 4 members in attendance in the chambers and 3 calling in. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America.
which stands
One
nation,
which stands, one nation, without
justice for all.
Okay, there are no minutes for approval this evening. Brings us to item 4, which is amendments and/or approval of this evening's meeting agenda. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, well, we'll proceed. I guess we don't need a motion then if we just did it that way. So public hearings, there are none. Bid awards, there are none on tonight's agenda. That brings us to item 7, persons to be heard related to items on today's agenda. Clerk Thompson, is there anybody in the queue?
Yes, there are quite a few, it looks like. So let's start with, please, operator, if you could please unmute Donna Marsh.
Before we get started, I'd like to remind all callers that we have a 5-minute limit, and with 30 seconds left, I will just mention your name, and then you can continue till your 5 minutes is up. So please try to keep it within 5 minutes. Sorry, Donna. Okay, Donna, are you ready to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I wish we could do it in person. However, on the 3 different COVID-related proposals, I urge you to vote no. My first point, Mandate 5 with the harbor mortgage restrictions, having that extended for almost an entire additional year is absurd. Pushing these COVID restrictions out to the end of the third quarter 2021 will thoroughly decimate already struggling charter, sightseeing, passenger service businesses, as well as the hospitality industry here in Petersburg. We cannot survive on government bailouts. They are not the answer. Letting people run their lives and businesses as they see fit is the appropriate thing to do. I would urge you to let this thing expire and be done. The second point, face coverings, an absolute no. Experts are even flip-flopping. The World Health Organization wrote the widespread use of masks by healthy people in the community setting is not yet supported by high-quality or direct scientific evidence, and there are potential benefits and harms to consider. Oxford's Dr. Carl Hennigan, also the editor-in-chief of British medical journal Evidence-Based Medicine, says, it would appear that despite 2 decades of pandemic preparedness, there is considerable uncertainty as to the value of wearing masks. I could go on and give you reports, both pro and con. The evidence is not conclusive. I think it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, and I think this is an attempt there. If masks worked, we would not see the spike in cases. If testing was valid, we would not see the spike in cases. Imposing this forced compliance is a serious overreach placed on our population. By this new rule, you, the Assembly, are conveying the message that we, the people, do not and cannot think for ourselves. We, the people, do not wish to be forced into this compliance for which there is no serious science to back it up. For those who wish to wear a mask, go for it. For those who do not, so be it. Let the people of this community decide for themselves. Number 3, requiring testing to or upon prior to or upon entering Petersburg is nothing but a money grab. If a hospital gets $100 a test, which I understand from previous Assembly meetings that is the case, of course this makes sense. But the tests themselves, on many levels, are proven to be faulty. I think we all have anecdotal evidence of people who have tested multiple times for various reasons. One is positive, the other negative, or vice versa, or people who are signed up to take tests, but for some reason are called away where they do not take the test, but yet they get an email or notification that they've tested positive when there's never been a test in the first place. There's so much that is sketchy about that. People are fed up with the heavy-handedness of Alaskan government, both at the local and state levels. Borough Assembly, please vote no. I would rather die having lived instead of living and dying in fear. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk Thompson, will you please have Lori, would you please unmute the next caller? Do you have the list, Tom? I'll just let you do it.
Thank you. Lori, will you please unmute Joe Stratman?
Go ahead. Thank you. Well, my name is Joe Stratman, and I'm addressing the Assembly tonight as a resident of Petersburg. I would like to address two agenda items. I'd like to thank Mayor Jensen for public heads up on the current status of the legislation to transfer 23,000 acres of public land near Petersburg to the Southeast Alaska Landless Corporation. I've viewed the maps of the proposed lands near Petersburg to be privatized. Where the areas shown in the maps are low-resolution polygons without rivers and streams for reference, I have concerns with 3 of the proposed areas near Petersburg. The 2 areas on Central Mitkoff Island and the Bear Creek watershed are similar to areas in the past slated for timber production in the Forest Service's proposed overlook timber sale. I spent a lot of time fishing, hunting, and gathering on Bear Creek. These foods sustain my household through the winter, and I'm concerned that habitat in the Bear Creek watershed would be degraded by old-growth logging if the transfer were to take place, and that my access to the area would be limited or disallowed by the new owners. I'm also concerned about the parcel of land slated for transfer near Colorado Creek on Kupanoff Island. This is an area I have access from shore with my skiff to hunt deer. It is one of the few beaches on the Kupanoff side of the Narrows not in Kupanoff city limits between Petersburg Creek and Beecher Pass. That is public land that can be accessed from the shore. I'm concerned that my access to this area to hunt deer will be limited or disallowed, and the deer habitat in the area will be degraded once the land there is privatized. I would ask the Assembly to respectfully request the 2 parcels in the Bear Creek watershed and the parcel near Colorado Creek on Kupanoff to be removed from the proposed land transfer and perhaps replaced by other parcels further from Petersburg with less value to local subsistence users. I feel that these 2 areas should remain public lands for all to use and enjoy. And I'd also like to address the face covering mandate. I'd like to thank Assemblyman Ricci's discussion to consider a face covering mandate. I think there's been a lack of federal and state leadership on this issue, and I think it's unfortunate that it falls on local officials to put these kind of changes in place. I think public health experts are clear on the efficacy of face coverings to limit the transfer of virus from person to person. I think a face covering mandate, at least in indoor spaces, would allow a better chance for schools and businesses to remain open until we have a vaccine to fight this disease. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk Thompson, will you please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, if you could please unmute Becky Knight.
Becky Knight, and I'm here to speak on the so-called landless bill. Can you hear me okay?
You're coming in very clear.
Okay. I agree with Mayor Jensen's Borough business comments today that there are problems with the bill and his earlier meeting comments about the need for public hearings on the proposed legislation. They should be in person after the effects of the pandemic have subsided. I request that you send a letter to Senators Murkowski and Sullivan asking them to reject this flawed legislation, or at least pause its fast-track trajectory. The public must have the opportunity to weigh in on this massive privatization of public resources and taxpayer-funded infrastructure. Murkowski's flawed bill is a land grab of monumental proportions, designed to put valuable public lands into private hands for development. It would withdraw substantial acreage from the Tongass National Forest and inevitably result in large-scale clear-cutting. It's a form of corporate welfare designed to enrich an entitled few at the expense of Alaskans and the American people. It is not appropriate or desirable to establish 5 new native corporations in southeast Alaska. While I respect the deep cultural ties of Alaska Native people to the lands of southeast Alaska, it's important to note that these 5 communities were found ineligible for independent corporate status under the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. Accordingly, the individuals involved received extra annual cash payments from Sea Alaska, of which they are at-large shareholders. In the words of Jim Lyons, Undersecretary for the Department of Agriculture in 1996, there are no landless natives in southeast Alaska since all natives have a beneficial interest in lands owned by Sea Alaska, including surface and subsurface estates. This fact must be included and documented on the record for this proposed legislation. Senator Murkowski has flip-flopped on the finality of native land claims. Following passage of the highly contentious 2014 Sea Alaska Land Swap Bill, which passed as a budget writer, she alleged it would finally finish paying the debt we owe natives for the settlement of their Aboriginal lands. In fact, her bill, which became that rider, was titled the Southeast Alaska Native Land Entitlement Finalization and Jobs Protection Act. Yet shortly thereafter, she introduced Senate Bill 872, an earlier version of this latest so-called landless legislation. And now she says this new bill would right a 50-year historical wrong. Saying so does not make it so. And why is finalization not final? The bill would give 15,200 acres of prime forest land to a relatively small group of already specially favored Sea Alaska shareholders in 5 communities: Haines, Ketchikan, Petersburg, Tenakee, and Wrangell. It includes millions of dollars worth of taxpayer-funded infrastructure, including, quote, all roads, trails, log transfer facilities, leases, and other incidentals on the land to be gifted. An example of why this amounts to a land grab by Murkowski is that the bill disproportionately allocates 23,000 plus acres to a reported 5 shareholders in Tenakee. That's equivalent to a handout of about 3,500 football fields worth of public land per person. Most of the lands were selected for their timber value and would be logged to the nubbin under the weak State Forest Practices and Resources Act. Examples of this kind of logging include the wholesale destruction seen around Hobart Bay and Cape. Most of the timber will be exported unprocessed along with its associated jobs to China. The timber industry has plans for a timber export facility near Cake, and the proposed Cake Access Road and the Northeast Kupreanof landless land exchange appears to be all part of one resource exploitation scheme. Since when has clear-cut logging been considered an important traditional practice of Native Alaskans? This habitat destruction does more to degrade important traditional use of these lands for everybody, hunting, fishing, and gathering, than it does to compensate for any historic inequity. It also undercuts the economic interests of the region by degrading salmon habitat. Public access conditions are specified in the proposed legislation and seemingly at the corporation's discretion. Local natives and non-natives will likely lose access to these hunting and fishing grounds. While Alaskans are distracted and exhausted by the pandemic and a contentious election cycle, Senator Murkowski intends to jam the bill through the legislative process by attaching it to must-pass legislation. The public must be allowed to weigh in on this travesty. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk Thompson, will you please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Dana Tinas.
Go ahead.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good deal. Okay, I'm calling in regard to the intrastate traveler testing proposed mandate. There will be people who don't wish to take a test or quarantine, people like me. If I am sick, I will quarantine. Home is where I want to be. But if I am not ill, I will refuse to comply. Alaska State Law, Section 18.15.385, gives me the right to appear before a judge within 48 hours to contest the quarantine. I will demand proof of an emergency. There is no emergency. When I asked the Assembly last month to explain what the emergency is, the answer I received was, because the governor said so. There is an emergency because the governor and the president have said we have a state of emergency. That is circular reasoning. That is not an answer. Back in July, the CDC said that the mortality rate of COVID-19 had dropped so much that soon there would no longer be enough deaths for it to qualify as an epidemic. So what are we doing here still? Why are we counting cases? It is not the right metric. What we should be looking at is the death rate, and that has flatlined. I think we're focusing on cases to keep the fear going. I don't know why, but that's what I see, and it is more unhealthy than this virus ever was. I will be calling in a second time to talk about the proposed mask mandate. Thank you.
You can continue if you would like. Right now, Mrs. Tinas, it's if you want.
She's disconnected.
Okay. All right. Will you please unmute the next caller, Clerk Thompson?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Tasha Spurl.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, council members, and fellow citizens of Petersburg that may be listening in the beginning, we were cautioned not to let the cure be worse than the virus, and it goes without saying that that will look different for every community, I believe. I think it's been pretty obvious over the last 8 months that the way Petersburg needs to assess risk is a whole different ballgame than most populations. We have a small, overly healthy population, but the fear being spread from many on our council, the EOC, and hospital administration is over the top. The division it has created in our community is unfathomable. In that respect, I believe that the cure has most definitely been worse than the virus for Petersburg. The emotional programming, such as you are a kind, respectful, caring person if you wear a mask, but are somehow a murderous, disrespectful rebel if you don't, is beyond twisted. The maskers are not saving us all. If that were true, then it would be equally true that the non-maskers are killing us all. That just isn't reasonable, nor is it reality. We can look at many states where the response to the virus has been severe and compare them to states where there has been a less restrictive approach and see there's little difference in the rate of infection. Our EOC said it's too late in the game to put the emphasis on decreasing comorbidities and strengthening the immune system. I guess I see some of this point because the programming has already been done. I've seen essential workers sanitizing their entire workstation while glaring at customers for not wearing a mask, who then continue to eat a junk-filled diet and smoke outside on their break. This is crazy behavior. Looking to others to keep one safe while single-handedly sabotaging your own health? This behavior has been reinforced by those in charge. Let's just imagine for a moment that the effort had been put into a healthier lifestyle and immune system while purposefully trying to decrease comorbidities. I truly think some of the behaviors I have seen would be quite different. Empowerment over fear. Our EOC said the emphasis needs to be on not catching the virus, but the story could be so different. Citizens could be changing their lifestyle and habits instead of living in fear. That would have been an extremely helpful message to be pushing. Get in the driver's seat, rate your own risk, and make choices accordingly. It's clear that making that your neighbor's job is not working to achieve an emotionally and physically healthy population. It's not too late to change the narrative. It's not too late to change the message. The council should not take the whole population of Petersburg and force the same protocol on everyone.
I see too many in the proverbial passenger seat waiting for the driver to get them where they're going safely. I choose to be in my own driver's seat, and I believe it's my right to be there. I am in control of my own risk assessment, my own health. I need to be in control of what my children wear over their face. I will continue to choose to shield my children from the programming of living in fear. There are so many aspects of health to consider here. Emotional well-being is every bit as important as physical. The council tried a mask mandate in Petersburg already. The negative impact that had on the community was too great. That will still be true tomorrow. I will not be told how to parent from someone who doesn't know my children or love them as immensely as I do. The borough and the assembly should not have that power. I will not allow the city to step between me and my children. I will continue to go with my gut feeling. As a mother of 5, it has served me well for 23 years of parenting. That gut feeling is telling me that masks are detrimental to my children's emotional well-being. That's not surprising. There are many studies citing that very fact. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, if you could please unmute Michael Truex.
Yeah, can you hear me? Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, we can.
Good evening. I'm calling to plead with you to vote no tonight against all COVID-related issues on the ballot. History is the greatest teacher. As a biologist, I'm aware that this is the least deadly pandemic the world's population has seen in thousands of years. Less deadly, yes, but very well marketed. Marketing is a powerful tool, and the medical industrial complex created by Big Pharma is marketing this mouse of a virus as a lion. That same medical industrial complex marches us down the roads of mandatory mask wearing and subsequent vaccination. My health and freedoms are not their primary concern. They are a for-profit industry. It is an important check on their powers that we as individuals maintain our medical freedoms, as no one cares about our own health more than we do. I care about my health and that of my community a lot. And I've noticed that my own immune system is the tool I will rely on most if I do get coronavirus or any other illness. The very capable human immune system is the reason that, so far, no case of COVID-19 has been hospitalized here in Petersburg. The quicker we as individuals beat the illness, the less likely we are to spread it to others, and thus we have a personal responsibility towards our own health. Masks inhibit respiration, period. No one would deny that, and it's been scientifically proven. The body needs oxygen to function. It also needs to expel carbon dioxide. As partial pressure of oxygen in the blood goes down, the carbon dioxide rises. We see a number of well-documented physiological effects. To name a few, increased cardiac load, decreased cognition and motor execution, and most importantly, decreased immune motility. The net results of these effects include lethargy and fatigue, increased susceptibility to infection, and even an increase in anxiety and depression. These effects undeniably create a real and present danger for those wearing masks. Older and less healthy individuals would see more pronounced effects. The other half of the question, do masks really help reduce the spread of COVID? Not necessarily. In a 2016 meta-study, which is an analysis of available scientific papers, the medical research entity Cochrane found almost no difference in infection rates with or without masks in the surgical theater. After a thorough and thoughtful analysis, researchers and professors Lisa Brousseau, SCD, and Margaret Sietsema, PhD, published an article titled, quote, "Masks for All for COVID-19 Not Based on Sound Data," end quote. This article was published by the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. It is well written and researched. They've since been accosted by many demanding the article be removed, but they stand by its truths in the face of that pressure. Meanwhile, with regards to the much-touted Hong Kong study, which demonstrated mask efficacy, a little reading shows that the study was performed on hamsters isolated from each other. Sick hamsters on one side of the glass, healthy hamsters on the other side, and a hole in the glass. As it turns out, taping a mask over that hole decreased the rate of disease transmission. Did you ever tape your mask on? That unrealistic study is the study the media turns to over and over? Wow. The psychological ramifications of forcing our school-aged children to mask at this developmental stage of life will be profound. We're making them afraid of each other and faceless. This is a grave injustice that will be with them for their lifetime. Please take away from this statement one fact. From my perspective, you are mandating that I cause real and profound harm to my community and loved ones. With the fine set by the recent emergency ordinance at an incredible $2,000, you really put many of us between a rock and a hard place. In my opinion, you are beyond your jurisdiction and authority to mandate that I do harm. These are the people that I love. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, if you could please unmute Brittany Collum.
Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you for taking my call this evening. I don't have a formally written letter I'm going to be reading off of, so I'm going to try to speak clearly and kind of quickly to get to the point. I am calling this evening in regards to all of the COVID items, but mainly the face coverings. I feel that, I guess, to put it bluntly, very frustrated by the Borough Assembly for the most part. Mayor Jensen, I feel like you have listened and tried to hear the people in regards to their concerns with the face coverings in particular. When it came up a while back, it did not go over well in town, and I feel that it's really important that we remember that. And as you can tell by all the callers this evening, there's quite a few people in town that feel strongly it is an overreach of government, and I feel that with the evidence that we are seeing that masks do cause more harm than they do good, we need to leave it up to the citizens to decide if they want to wear a mask or not. I can tell you, I, for one, will not be wearing a mask because of the research I have seen, and my son will not be either. I'm not going to subject him to that kind of it's bad for his mental health, it's bad for his respiratory system, it's bad all around really, and it's not going to help him with this virus. And I think it's also important that you open your ears and eyes to see that this virus, although it is bad, it is right in line with the flu, which we have dealt with for many, many years, and not in this panicked manner. And I don't think it's wise that we treat it as something it is not. It is no longer a pandemic. It is no longer something we need to fear. In the very beginning, when this virus first came out this year, I was fearful. I'll just say that because I didn't understand what it was, what it would do. I was wearing a mask, I was wearing the gloves, but I don't see any more the need to do that because it's not true. So I would just ask that you listen to the people and allow them to make their own decisions. And I do hope you listen because I can see from what has happened in the past that it will tear this town apart if you do not start to listen to the citizens. And it's really sad that I'm saying that because I do love the town, but I feel that we aren't being listened to and we are being ridiculed for having these thoughts and having seen this research and bringing it to your attention. And I don't think that's right. And I think it's an abuse of their position, quite frankly. So I do hope you hear us, and I do hope that you don't know on the COVID items because we should be allowed to live life without being fearful of. Yep. of government. And that's really what this nation was founded on, and we are stepping away from that rapidly. And I don't want to take it anymore, quite frankly. So thank you for hearing me, and I do hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you for your testimony. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Matt Powick.
Go ahead.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just calling in tonight to speak in favor of adopting public health mandate number 8 with face coverings. I submitted a letter to the mayor and assembly members on July 27th earlier this year in support of a temporary mask mandate for Petersburg. My stance on this issue has not changed, but I felt I should vocalize my thoughts at this time. In my previous letter, I asked the mayor and assembly to try and think 10 years into the future, and at that point, given the gift of hindsight, will you be able to look back at this time and know whether you did everything you could have and should have to protect your family, friends, and community against this pandemic? I'd like to rephrase that question this evening, but nearly 4 months later, because I believe we no longer need the gift of hindsight. We know enough right now. We can no longer say, we don't know if masks even make a difference. Study after study has shown that masking while unable to socially distance is our best weapon for slowing the spread of this virus. We can no longer argue that this is an overreaction and we're safe here in Petersburg. The case counts in Alaska continue to rise dramatically. The first 2 weeks of July saw the state averaging 46 new cases a day, and in the first 2 weeks of November, we have averaged 501 new cases every day. Juneau currently has 96 active cases, Ketchikan has 50, Sitka 32. We've been fortunate to not have any large-scale outbreaks in Petersburg, but that can change overnight. This virus is on our doorstep. In the event that the Assembly does not pass mandate number 8, I would then ask my fellow Petersburg residents to choose to mask in public regardless. Wearing a mask is an act of kindness for your fellow community members, and such a minor inconvenience at that. If my wearing a mask prevents one death, it will have been worth it. Now, more than ever, we need to take care of each other. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Clerk Thompson, will you unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Cecilia Tavoliero.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I had hoped to wait for the agenda item to come up before I address the Borough Assembly. However, I will go ahead and respond and actually come up with a request. I have listened to some of the concerns of the non-shareholders in Petersburg, possible non-shareholders, and I'm just wondering, do you really think that all of Alaska's delegation would not even take that into consideration? It's in the bill for public access to the lands that have already been being used. But first I would like to just say, I think it's hard for most people to think in blanket terms. We must have a very long-term perspective. Old growth forests are beautiful indeed, and 500-year-old trees are impressive. And we have much respect and reverence for them too. But please keep in mind, our people have been on our lands way before the oldest trees and the oldest forests. We were literally here when the mountaintops and the valley floors were being formed. We've been on this land since time immemorial, 10,000 years plus. We were here before the Ice Age, and again, when the ice first receded, we have songs and stories of our people going under and over the glaciers to get what is currently our homeland. We were here before the Great Flood. We have stories of our people climbing mountains to escape the floodwaters. It will be interesting to know. Interested to know that there was not one of them. We have place names for those mountains. Those stories are thousands of years old. But we don't just have ancient songs and stories. We have scientific proof that our people have been here for at least 10,000 years. That is older than Western civilization as we know it. We have several other stories about specific places that belong to specific clans. And many of these stories are hundreds of years old, which is older than the United States of America. So
So, to understand the Tlingit and their connection to our land, you must understand how we made things. Everything had spirit. The Ron Thomas had and the stories had spirits that protected our people in their time of living. We have one God. We've always had one God. And our clans own these lands and the waters that sustain us. In Tlingit, this is known as Atu, owned by the clan. And that's most prized possessions. Actual objects and stories, songs. So when people think in terms of how long the Tlingits have been here, it's been thousands of years, and the Haida and Tsimshian for centuries. We've heard that this injustice has been going on for 50 years, that our communities were left out of the Land Claim Settlement Act. As a matter of fact, there was a study commissioned by Congress in 1994 that had a very in-depth study from very educated people, and they came up with that. It's on our website. I don't know if any of you would like to take a look at our website. It's called withoutland.org. You'll find a number of that study is in there. It's the ISO report, Institute of Social and Economic Research. And you can get in there and find out each of the communities. And no, it's not just someone made a really small comment about Teneke. And anyway, they have their shareholders scattered all over the place, just like Petersburg. There originally were 400 and some. Out of the 3,300 original shareholders from all the communities combined, the 5 communities, Ketchikan, Wrangell, Haines, Teneke, and Petersburg, 48% have passed on, waiting for this bill to pass. And we're pleased that Senator Murkowski, this is not something that's rushed. This is almost 50 years old we've been at this, and we're not going to go away. We're not going to give up. This is our traditional homeland. A whole different perspective of looking at it. So the bills have been introduced, and we would like to sit down, have a special meeting if you would like, and review the whole bill, the details, and there is public access that is going to continue. I've heard that is a very large concern of many people, and we understand that. I mean, gosh, we grew up in Southeast, and I remember the clear cutting. The Forest Service had 2 50-year contracts with Japan. That was KPC and AL.
Can you please wrap up?
Anyway, the logging companies that were in existence back then, they had to help Japan get back on their feet after World War II. There was a lot of logging going on, and I remember thinking, and I was in high school, and I was wondering why are the Forest Service people cutting? And I didn't realize it was clear cutting, too. I didn't realize it was in fulfillment of those contracts for the federal government and selling it at a loss.
So, yep.
And so is my time up?
Yes, you're 30 seconds over. That's what the bill indicates, so sorry.
I'm sorry. But yeah, if we could go ahead and set up a meeting so we can review this as a special item, that'd be great.
Get in touch with the clerk, and we'll see you.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Clerk, please unmute the next caller.
Yes, Lori, if you could please unmute Courtney Truex.
Go ahead. Hi, greetings, Assembly. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a little background noise, but you're coming in clearly.
Okay. Thank you for hearing my perspective today. I fully appreciate the clinic and hospital we have here in Petersburg, but I disagree with their enthusiasm for a mask mandate. The modern medical establishment has offered humanity many a gem and continues to offer many a gem of healing protocols and techniques, but that is not to say they have not been wrong either. We
We, the public, are being led to believe by mass media that mask wearing does no harm, and to stop the spread of COVID, we must mask up when moving about our day. There are studies referencing both the potential harm and uselessness of mask wearing. Indeed, that is how the scientific process works. Keep researching for deeper understanding. No, these studies won't be referenced to on mainstream media because they don't support their narrative. Please don't file me away as ignorant, selfish, or a conspiracy theorist. Health is important to me, and so is my community. Maybe you yourself have been told by a nurse or a doctor that a pharmaceutical drug was safe and effective, and it turned out not true for you. Or maybe you had surgery that didn't end up going the way you told it would. Continued mask wearing could be just that too. And certainly, things affect people differently, and that is the point. A man with severe asthma, now mandated to wear a mask in public, chooses just to not leave his house and spirals deeper into depression. Or the pregnant woman now has to deprive herself and her baby of oxygen for 45 minutes at the post office. There are too many examples to list. And we're just supposed to go along because that's what the medical establishment wants us to do. Or how about the fact that the popular surgical masks everyone's wearing now are made of plastic and off-gassing, and we are now inhaling microfibers of plastic daily. Surely that can't be supporting a robust immune system to fight off COVID. If you are considering a mask mandate, then why not consider banning the sale of alcohol, cigarettes, and junk food? Because that will encourage much healthier populations and keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed. Maybe the hospitals, its employees, and the assembly could channel COVID relief money towards supplying the community with free vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin A, and zinc, all known immune-boosting supplements at this time. And that's it. Thanks for hearing my comment.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Bridget Davidson.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to sincerely thank the Assembly for taking my call tonight. Sorry, I've got kiddos in the background. Let me see if I can go to shortly quiet place. Thanks for taking my time, or letting me take your time tonight. I've been thinking about you guys, and I want to acknowledge you tonight. The weight upon you must be enormous right now. And Petersburg is certainly divided on some of these important issues that are on the agenda. And so it's like you guys are in kind of a tough spot because either way do you go, whether you impose a mask mandate or you don't. People that in the community, we know everybody. We know everybody's mom and dad, and we know what dog they have and what coat they wear. I mean, it's like it's hard. And so I just you're doing us a service as part of our government. And so I think we can, no matter who you are in town, I think we can all agree that the people of Petersburg work hard. We are a hard-working community. And I believe that many people in Petersburg just want to feed their families. And I may be wrong, but I think that some folks, if a mask mandate weren't put in place, some may mask for the fear of being sued, if it's a business. Some may mask for fear of losing friends, being fined, or losing their jobs. And I don't know if any of you find yourselves in a situation where you feel like you might be ostracized if a mask mandate is not put in place. But to anyone that is feeling afraid, I'd just like to say to them, be not afraid. Okay, so I got to pull one other thing I wrote here. If you take 1 second here. So this is a little bit fluffy, but I wrote this up for you. If you're feeling afraid tonight, when the darkness surrounds you, be not afraid. When you're scared to speak, be not afraid. When doubt fills your mind, be not afraid. When you feel alone, be not afraid. When the storm and waves come, be not afraid. When you think you can't go one step further, be not afraid. You are not alone. And then another sentiment that I have for you is from one of my favorite trilogies, Lord of the Rings, for all our nerds out there tonight. It's a quote in the second book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers, and it's amongst two friends. And I think that no matter who we are, we can kind of relate to this. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clear. Those are the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. And to go on to quote Sam and this, but I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in these stories had lots of chances to turn it back, only they didn't. Because they were holding on to something. And yes, what are we holding on to? That there is some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's what we're and it's worth fighting for. So I do oppose the mask mandate, and for all those that might be afraid, if it does come to pass, you're not alone. I'm sure that a good number of people are exhausted, and I'm sure the Assembly is probably feeling pretty enormous weight. So I acknowledge that, and I appreciate you taking my call. Thank you.
Thank you for your call this evening. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, will you please unmute Boston Reed?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. I don't have a prepared statement tonight, but I just wanted to say a couple of things. It has to do with the COVID stuff. I don't know anyone with COVID-19. Surely someone there in the council or someone who's listening to this meeting does. I'm sure it has been devastating for people along the way. There's no doubt about the fact that it's dangerous, that it has harmful side effects. I do know people who have been affected by the reaction to COVID-19. And I just want to make known to folks who are considering passing legislation here or whatever, making a mandate for everyone. I just want you to consider some things. I know a man personally who has been in alcohol rehab for a couple of months now, and one of the things that pushed him over the edge was the state of our reaction to this pandemic and the top-down effects of it. I know another woman here, a local woman in town, whose niece tried to commit suicide down south because she feels like there's no hope. I also know a man personally in this town who suffers from COPD so bad that if he were to wear a mask when he went to and from wherever he went, he may actually die from lack of oxygen. There are consequences to our actions, and yes, COVID-19 is serious, and yes, we have to take it seriously, and yes, there are things we can do to protect our neighbors, and we should. But beyond that, we need to understand that we need to support and respect one another to make for ourselves the decisions that can only be made by ourselves and for ourselves, which
pertain to our health. I mean, we can't, a governing body cannot be a doctor for the town, for the state, or for the nation. That's ridiculous. Doctors need to have intimate relationships with their patients and understand their patients on a level that goes beyond a blanket broad brush policy. There's no one size fits all. And so we have to understand that, I agree with Tasha and Michael and Brittany and Dana and a whole bunch of these folks that have called in on the fact that we don't need to go down this road to mandate, something for everyone. And I disagree with, other callers who have called in, but I respect their ability to make that decision for themselves. I respect my neighbor who wants to wear a mask, and I'll give them space, and I will give them help if they need it. Anything I can do to either come alongside them or leave them be as they see fit or need to be, I don't know how to say it. I maybe should have come up with something better to say, but to wrap it up, I would make every effort to accommodate my neighbor in this town, and I think most of us would. Petersburg is a good and decent community filled with good and decent people, and what I don't want to see is a rule that governs every person as a blanket policy, claiming that this is what's good for all, because it's not. And I also don't want to see us finger-pointing at each other. Hell, they wear a mask, they're, such and such, whatever, and they don't wear a mask, they're careless and they're rude and they don't care, because that's not true. We all care about each other, and we're all doing what we think is right for us and for you. And so what I would do is I would give each and every one of you the shirt off my back, and I would help you to the best of my ability. But what I won't do is I won't give my or your individual right to bodily autonomy, my individual or your individual right of conscience, and or the ability of each individual to choose for themselves. That's something we can't do. And that's something that happens when we legislate or mandate a rule that's a one-size-fits-all. So I'm completely against mandating any COVID-19 mask-wearing protocols or whatever. We need to have a better solution than that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Dana Tinas.
There is a strange assumption by many that people only refuse to wear masks because they're selfishly insisting on personal rights. I don't know anybody like that. The people I know who refuse masks have done enough serious research to know that masks do not stop viruses, and they don't want to pretend. Those who wish to force masks on others seem not to have looked at any actual studies. Instead, they are taking the word of a favorite doctor, institution, or top men. That's not science, that's a religion. A nurse up at the hospital who happens to be a friend sent me a screenshot. The CDC says masks stop viruses, she said. I looked at the screenshot and realized it was an article I'd read more than once. She was in error. In the article, the CDC did not say, and never has said, that masks stop viruses. What they do say is that they may help slow the spread. Yes, they will be about as effective as when you throw a handful of sand through a chain link fence. A few grains of sand may stick to the fence, but the rest passes right on through. And you know what? That's okay, because your own immune system handles this virus so well that there is a 99.98% survival rate. Yes, 99.98% survival rate. That's better than any vaccine can do. And for people over the age of 75, there is a 95% survival rate. That rate would be even higher if our governors and state boards of health would allow the use of common therapeutics known to work, such as budesonide and hydroxychloroquine with zinc. Why is our public health system blacklisting such effective medicines? Because then there would be no cry for the experimental vaccines, which can only be used under an emergency use authorization when there is nothing else for the job. This emergency use authorization is necessary so that vaccine makers can be exempted from legal liability for death and injury. Why the fear? We are swimming in a sea of viruses and bacteria all the time. If it was about the germ, we'd all be dead before we were a few days old. Our bodies are smart. We need to remember that there are more bacteria and viruses in us and on us and around us than we have cells in our bodies. Many of them not just helpful, but even crucial for our survival. Are masks effective? No, because the virions of coronavirus are 1/30th the size of surgical mask filtrations. Those masks, and especially cloth masks, do not help. Is there harm from masks? Yes. What one assembly member has called a tool in our toolbox is health-threatening. Masks deliver bacteria to our lungs. A mask can become a virus collector. Viruses and bacteria will stay on the surface and in the masks during wear. The viruses live and remain active in a warm and humid environment of the masks. Please don't be like those cult followers who make decisions based not on available science but on authority because someone said so. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Fauci's NIAID, have become a priesthood. And too many are following their dictates in a manner resembling a religious cult. With a 99.98% survival rate, this fear is completely unnecessary. Fear is never helpful and it's never virtuous. With a mask, you are a walking billboard of fear. It is a symbol of fear. Is this how you want your family to live? In fear? In never-ending dystopia? And not being able to see the smiles of friends and family? This great scare is not going away unless you turn away from that fear and take back your freedom. Freedom is never given. It must be taken. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk Thompson, will you please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Amanda Omer.
Go ahead. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. First I want to say thank you to the mayor and the assembly members, for your time and your attention to our community, regardless of which direction you lean, left or right, whether our opinions are the same. I have the utmost respect for people sacrificing their own personal time to do their civic duty and be a part of our local government. When the governor, when he came out with his alert the other day, my first thought was, how long until we start seeing local mandates for masks or for more strict policies? And I'll tell you, it was about 30 minutes. 40 minutes before I got the first email that indicated that this was already on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And so I have to ask myself, what has changed for Petersburg? What has changed for our community? Are there higher cases in the U.S.? Yes, and there always have been. Are there higher cases in the state? Yes, and there always have been. But with the few increased cases that Petersburg has seen, what we're doing has worked and is still working. We've caught our cases at the airport. We've caught our cases through, regular testing of hospital employees. We've caught our cases where we thought we would, and we've contained them as we thought we could. And those cases have not spread or caused any problems. What we are doing is working. So the fact that the moment the governor speaks up and says really nothing more than what we already know, cases are rising, be safe. That's what he said. Cases are rising, be safe. So we were already doing that. But the fact that the minute he says that, our local assembly jumps on the chance to put stricter restrictions on the community of Petersburg is really a slap in the face for those of us, whether we agree or not with the severity of this disease, whether we agree or not, we are all sacrificing. We are all doing everything that we can, whether we agree with it or not. We're all doing it. My grandmother is turning 95. And this is something that not only my family, but the community of Petersburg should be celebrating, like literally the celebration of the century. This is a woman that has touched the hearts of every single Petersburg resident. And yet, rather than be able to have a warm celebration, we are doing drive-by, which I'm so excited for, because she's going to love it. Regardless of how we celebrate, she's going to love it. But this is not what she deserves. This is not what I would envision the celebration for a woman that has brought so much to every heart in this community. So to say that we aren't sacrificing enough, to say that we aren't washing our hands and distancing ourselves enough, we're not doing a good enough job, that now you want to come in and mandate us even more, that's a slap in the face. Because regardless of whether I agree with the masking, regardless of whether I agree that this is as worrisome as it needs to be, as something that needs to be so, change the lives, of everybody and everything in the entire nation, we're all still sacrificing. We're all still giving up. All of the messages now is, we know you're fatigued. We know you're tired. Well, you know what? You're right. I am fatigued. I am tired. I'm tired of sacrificing. I'm tired of no Sunday dinners with my family. I'm tired of, of my kids feeling like they can't go hug their grandmother without a risk of infecting her with some deadly disease. And yet we're all still sacrificing. We're all doing it, and what we're doing is working. It's working for Petersburg. Nothing has changed for us from today to a week ago. And all I ask is that you have the faith in us to continue to do what we've been doing all along, and that is keeping our community and our family and friends safe. Please do not mandate us for any stricter measures in regards to COVID. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Lori, please unmute Courtney Hess.
Hello, this is Courtney Hess. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Dr. Hess. I'm one of the family medicine physicians at Petersburg Medical Center, and I just wanted to, I'll keep my comments brief because I know you've been listening to lots of comments tonight, but I wanted to voice some support for a community-wide mask mandate. The reason that I think this is increasingly important right now is that the cases in Alaska and in the country are just growing exponentially right now. We've seen a much higher peak than at any other time during this pandemic. I have contacts in the hospitals in Anchorage, and they are really close to meeting capacity in their ICUs. Our referral centers are Anchorage and Seattle, and the information I see coming out of Seattle through our connection with University of Washington is that their hospitals are starting to fill up again too. So we're getting to a point where if we have infections locally, if somebody needs a ventilator, if somebody needs care, we're going to probably in the next 2 to 4 weeks be in a situation where we can't ship people out. And that's really a scary, scary situation for families and for doctors. There's a lot that we haven't been able to control this year. There's a lot of feeling fear and a lot of feeling like the world is sort of spinning out of control. But I see masking as one really simple thing that people can do that gives you a measure of protection against viral spread. Communities that mask have lower viral rates. It's really clear when you look at areas that mask well, that have mask mandates, that support their communities in empowering people to be able to wear masks and not be questioned about it. Those communities have less viral spread. And we've been really, really lucky in Petersburg to keep our numbers down. We have done a good job at putting things into place. We have the benefit of being isolated. But with as much spread as happening right now in the country, there are going to be more and more cases that come in. There are going to be people that don't test at the airport, that spread it, and it's only going to take a couple of spreading events to completely overwhelm our systems. So I advocate for a mask mandate. I really appreciate the Assembly for taking this up again, because I know it's a divisive issue. Listen to a lot of comments. There's a lot of I think, misinformation about masking. There's nothing that shows that it impedes the flow of oxygen. As somebody that has been using a mask every day since March, I have not had any trouble with my breathing, and I've been in surgical cases where I've been masked for 8 hours alongside the other the surgeons, and there's no trouble with everybody's brain functioning because of lack of oxygen. So I really see this as a public health issue. I see this as something that the community can do to keep our schools open, to keep our businesses open, and to not have to close those things down because there's been so much virus going on. So I really encourage you to move forward with a masking mandate to keep our community safe in these next few months as we move into what could be an incredibly challenging time for the medical community, for public health. So, again, I thank you for your time and considering this issue.
Thank you for your testimony. Will the clerk please unmute the next caller?
Mayor Jensen, I believe we are out of callers.
Oh? Okay, that brings us to... where are we? Item 8, persons to be heard on items unrelated to tonight's agenda. Are there any callers in the queue?
I see none.
Okay, that brings us to board, commission, and committee reports. There are none. No items on the consent agenda. Report of other officers. The first person under there is the mayor's report. Very short report this evening. I will give a brief report on the Conference of Mayors that I attended yesterday. I didn't get to attend both days. I was busy with other business. So on the mayor's report, we have seeking letters of interest. The Assembly is seeking letters of interest from Borough residents who wish to serve the community by filling a vacant seat on the following boards, commissions until October 2021 municipal election. Planning Commission has 2 vacant seats. Public Safety Advisory Board has 2 vacant seats. Letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the Borough office located at 12 South Nordic Drive by mailing to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And that wraps up my mayor's report. It's now time for the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Visitation at assisted living continues to go well with the protocols we have in place. Information is available on the Borough website if anyone has any questions, or please call Sheeran at 772-2445 with any questions you may have. Raffle tickets were being sold for the covered deck project at the Manor. The drawing will take place on February 14th, 2021, or sooner if all tickets are sold. 9 beautiful quotes will be given for 9 winning tickets. See Sally Dwyer or Sheeran if you'd like a ticket or have any questions. The tree and site work being completed by Rock and Road for the Rotary Playground at Sandy Beach is completed for the moment. Just wanted to thank them for donating their time to the project. D&D did some following some of the remaining unsafe trees as identified by them in the Forest Service. All the trees that were moved out of there were taken up to the baler for public use to cut for firewood. Power and Light has pulled temporary power for us
down at the back of the pool to run the extra office trailer, and the rented heater at Parks and Rec was installed for a very short period of time, because the really good news is temporary repairs to the pool. We've got electricity on. Looks like the pool temperatures are getting to where they're supposed to be, and other components are being checked as we speak. We're doing day-to-day, I should say, and we're getting much closer to potentially having the pool reopened. We do have to check some things, and we've got a fire panel issue there that is giving us some problems. Morris Engineering Group and Anderson Brothers Electric basically showed up, got all the basic power to the aquatic center, and got us enough power to run the heating system. We did have some issues with getting 2 boilers run, but they were able to solve that this weekend. And the facility, like I said, is warm, no condensation, and we think we've got it protected pretty well right now. Our individual patron use at the fitness center continues to be low, so folks who want to use that, please get out there. The library board has accepted a $100,000 donation to the library's endowment fund from Sue Paulson. The community room will be named in honor of her mother, Helmy Jensen. The donation will be fully endowed so that the principal can never be spent, and the annual earnings, roughly $2,000 per year, will be available for library projects. Sue's support for our library and for all of Petersburg libraries is legendary. We are thrilled to be naming the community room in her mother's honor. Alaska Airlines has made a $400 donation to support the Discovery Kits project at the library. And another great service has returned. The passport services have resumed at the library. Thank you to harbor users for paying attention to your vessels, especially during stormy and rainy weather. Please continue to let the harbor office know if you plan on being out of town, and provide us with your boat watching contact information. Power and Light has decided to reject all proposals for the supply of equipment for the Blind Slough Hydro project at this time. Without a firm funding arrangement in place, award of the equipment procurement would force the utility into a situation where a bond sale special election is put to the local voters during the pandemic. The hydro facility continues to turn along, and Power and Light will be monitoring its performance closely while keeping the maintenance program running at full speed to prevent any failures of the switchgear, turbine, and generator. Recent meeting with FERC with Power and Light will result in some minor additional stability analysis for the Crystal Lake Dam. The utility received recommendations to perform a new dam break study in the future, which may lead to a reduction in the dam hazard classification. If we can get that done, the reduction would reduce departmental efforts a great deal, so Power and Light will be looking into this possibility. Thanks to the Police Department and the Petersburg Voluntary Fire Department, which all handed out candy and glow necklaces for Halloween. Thanks for their holiday spirit, and we drove out as far as khakis, and we're all over town helping it make it safe for the kids. Chief Kerr, I want to thank him. He's making a presentation to Alaska Municipal League on the Community Jails Program representing Petersburg. We completed the first round 1 of the economic support grants, thanks to Shannon and Molly for assistance. Final results, 55 applications received, 49 grants awarded. The average grant award was $9,200. The total amount awarded was $451,200. Round 2 of the economic support grants is now open. Applications are available online and at the Finance Office and Public Library. Deadline to apply is November 20th. Nonprofits and child care providers who receive Borough CARES Act grants in June and July have until November 30th to spend any remaining funds. Recipients should submit their grant reports very soon. Those attended the Alaska Municipal League meetings with DNR regarding SB 204. This is a state lands bill that would remove borough platting authority and place it with the state's DNR whenever the state turns land over to private hands. Every municipality in attendance voiced concern and opposition. Attended follow-up session to provide input on an AML position paper that Liz is going to help be part of. We expect the legislation to be filed for consideration this coming year. Sandy returned to work on November 2nd. She's catching up and getting back into the swing of things. It's really great to have her back. Brian organized the Learn Not to Burn program for the kindergarten through 5th grade at the elementary school, ordering educational materials, loaning DVDs, and coordinated with the school for teachers to present material. Due to the COVID, no volunteer fire department members went into the school, but we were able to get the materials in their hands. Annual pump testing on the fire engines was completed by Hughes Fire Service. Josh took the EMT2 course and is going through the process to get certified. He's also pursuing the Emergency Trauma Technician Instructor certification. Our hydrant miniaturization is complete and snow removal equipment is all prepped and ready. The streets crew replaced 10 planks on the Rasmus Inge Bridge and plans to replace a couple more soon. Looks like we will have to start planning for replacing the bridge deck again. We'll include it in next year's proposed budget. The intermittent control problem that we're having with the solid waste baler appears to be resolved. The issue was a warranty-related manufacturing defect in one of the fuse modules. The firm that sold it to us sent the technician out. They were able to nail it down, fix it, and the faulty module has been replaced, and we're hopeful that the problem will not repeat. Several representatives from the city of Quogue, including their mayor and public works director, visited Petersburg's baling facility on Wednesday, November 4th. Chris and the crew gave them a tour of the site and explained how our baling process actually works. Due to an upcoming change in the shipping policy by Alaska Marine Lines, they will no longer allow municipal solid waste to be shipped in open-top containers. Quogue is one of the number of towns in southeast Alaska that is actively looking at installing a baler to comply with the new policy with AML. And that's it. That's just questions.
Okay, thank you, Manager Giesbrecht. Is there any questions from Assembly members of the Manager's report? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Hey, I was wondering if you could give us like a short, we talked a little bit about the pool, and we saw your report this morning about, the possibility of the pool reopening sooner than later. Can you kind of give us the short story on how that would go about happening?
Sure. So everything on a temporary basis has been fixed. That includes heat of the water as well as in the building. And we've gone through all of the electrical systems. We've moved our network back to where it belongs, and I think it is up and running. We have a problem or concern. The main fire panel was affected by the event. I've ordered a new fire panel. I don't know how long that'll be. So if we do reopen the facility, we do it without a fire system, and we really have to understand the rules behind that. I've asked Brian Welby to talk to the state fire marshal when everybody's back on Wednesday to find out there's a process called Fire Watch that could be done. I just want to make sure that applies to a facility that potentially we have very young children in. So we need to understand that. We need to have a pretty well thought out evacuation plan and some training for our employees if we are going to allow folks in there when we don't have a active fire system. So that's still to be talked about. We do also have a problem with the HVAC units. They're both up and operational. Unfortunately, some of the damage that we have, we've got the common area, so like where the offices are in the front entryway of the aquatic center, is at the same temperature as the aquatic center itself. So if you're out there swimming, it feels really good when you get out of the pool. On the other hand, if you're in our lobby, you're sweating. So that makes it for a pretty uncomfortable situation for our employees. We're having some conversations with the contractor, and they had to go get some parts, and we're hoping they can find a way to fix that on a temporary basis. One of the things they discovered was the system was actually designed in a way where 3/4 of the pool is on one heating system, and the other quarter in the lobby is on another. So they really are tied together. It's really difficult to cool off the lobby without making the main aquatic center heater work overtime to keep up, which we don't want to do right now when everything is kind of a temporary basis. We don't want to overtask either boiler or the air exchanger system. So, again, if we can reopen, we're going to. We'll likely do it on a very controlled basis to make sure that we understand what's happening and we don't get people hurt. And this is all a temporary process. I've submitted all this to the insurance company. All the contractors that were here, we had a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, and an electrical contractor. They will be doing a report for me and the insurance company. We'll provide that to the school. And the hope is to get a clearer picture on what that means long term and what those costs will be to do the final repair. Majority of this, if not all of it, will be covered by insurance, but which gives the insurance company the opportunity to kind of weigh in on what the plan looks like. So I did ask the contractor how long he thought the formal project would be. He said literally he sees it as a spring or summer project, primarily because ordering the parts we need has a long delay on it. And that's maybe the most important part on the permanent side, which is identifying, getting permission to move forward and then identifying those things that have such long lead times and getting them ordered so we could start that permanent project sooner. And I think that was about it. And lots of little stuff, but just a huge shout out to the contractors who were able to clear their schedules and spend a little over a week here in Petersburg working on this stuff and basically jury-rig a solution that got things rolling.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other questions of the manager? Did you just receive an email?
I was going to talk to you about it after we were done here, if that's possible.
Okay, let's just take a 2-second break so I can communicate with the clerk on an email we just received. 2 seconds.
That would be appropriate.
Thank you. Lori, this is Clerk Thompson. We have been notified that a resident did try to call in. I did see him on the screen twice, but he dropped off pretty quickly both times. Mr. Beebe, if you are listening, if you could please call in again. And Lori, when David Beebe does call in, if you could please let us know and we will put him through. Actually, we'll hang on here for a minute. Hopefully he can call in right now.
Perfect.
Lori, do you happen to have a number that you could call him back on, or is that not the case?
Unfortunately, we do not have his number.
Okay. Well, Mr. Beebe, if you're listening to the radio, we would appreciate it if you would call in so we could move along with the meeting. Okay, Lori, why don't we do it this way? We will continue with the agenda as it is, and if Mr. Beebe calls in, feel free to interject. Can you do that?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, that brings us to unfinished business. There are no items under unfinished business this evening. New business, there is a number of items, and I would like to address the first 3 items while the Borough Clerk or Borough Finance Director, Jody Tao, is in the audience, and then we will take a brief break and then continue on item D after our break. So, the first item under new business is Ordinance 2020-24, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2021 budget for known changes. I would entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion. And what this does is it creates a capital project fund for the aquatic center repairs and lists the CARES Act special revenue fund expenditures to date in fiscal year 2021. If there is any questions of the finance director, now might be a good time. Member Lynn.
Yeah. Just a quick question, Jody. Does that testing at the airport go through the December 31st?
Yes, it ends at December 31st, but that's not part of the CARES Act funding. That's on a separate contract with the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Ducci, did you have a question? No.
Sorry for the interruption. I have Mr. Dave Beebe online now.
Okay. Can you hold off until we're done with this ordinance? And then we will reach out.
No problem.
So if you can hear us, Mr. Beebe, it might be 5 minutes at the most, I would anticipate. Is there any other discussion on this ordinance? Okay, I have a question. I know it's been in discussion. We talked about it at Borough Business today about what we can potentially do with the excess funds. And I don't know what the amount is going to be, but I know some other communities, Kenai, for instance, has given out money, grant money to fishermen, and some of it, I guess, was based on your permits. And to qualify, I believe, for them, you had to, it was in 2019 because they did it so early, but we could potentially do it for 2020. This is just an idea to throw out there. But you'd have to earn a certain limit on a permit. You couldn't have a permit and not fish it and then get any of this money, this grant money, if that's what it would be deemed. So anyway, so much per permit fish this season. That's just an idea. So maybe that's something we could talk about at the next meeting, or how we're going to expend the rest of the money, because I believe we have to spend it.
We have to spend it by December 31st. And actually, that is a funding program that Director Cabrera and I have been discussing about proposing to the Assembly. Things have been changing. You know, the school is giving back some of the money that they don't need. We don't know if we're going to spend all of the utility subsidy. We don't know if we'll spend all of that, the $100,000 that you allocated for the second round of business grants, if that will be spent. And so by the end of November, we should have a much better idea about how much we're going to have available. And that was one of the programs that we were looking at. And in all honesty, it's simpler than some of the other programs because we do just have until the end of the year to spend it. So.
Member Lynn?
Yeah. I guess one of my questions when you come back to us is, I know there's 3 other different relief programs, federal relief programs out there, that what we'd want to do is do something, I would assume, that is not covered by those programs.
Yes, and like the latest one that's coming out for the state, the $50 million, I don't think that's going to be a lot of money for the commercial fishermen. It would be different. This particular program, the city of Kenai did, and it seemed to have a good response. I think Liz Cabrera is also on the line. If you had any questions for her, she wanted to chime in about any other programs we were looking at. But that's the one we've heard the most about. We're really focusing on the utility one. So far to date, we have 250 applications for the utility subsidy. We were thinking we might have up to 1,000. I'm actually surprised we don't have more than 250 at this point, but we'll see at the end of November what that number comes out at.
And just for the utility grant program, there was $500,000 we allocated for that?
Yeah, correct. So $500 a utility account for residential.
So we could have a pretty good amount of money left at the end of November. We'll know.
We could. We have about $350,000 right now. And, we have been talking about we can use it to cover first responders, payroll, and which would ultimately put it into the general fund. And at the end, if we have money remaining, we will definitely do that rather than giving it back. But, if there are other ideas and things, please let us know because we're running out of time to actually, start them up.
Okay, Member Norheim?
I was wondering, is the utility Subsidy money, sorry. Is that advertised in the newspaper at all?
It is.
Oh.
There's a really big ad in the newspaper, actually.
Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, if you go on the Borough website, it's just you fill out the form and submit it, and it's real easy to do.
Yeah, it takes like 60 seconds.
One of the questions I know there's some discussion at the fire department about a need that they're trying to figure out if they do have. So if departments bring, or like the child care facilities bring additional requests for money, are we using that first meeting in November as the deadline, or would you be looking at maybe a special meeting in December to kind of distribute more funds if we had more funds left over?
Well, the next meeting will be the first meeting in December, and I would just like a clarification from the clerk. So do we have to make an amendment to this ordinance by a motion to amend in the second and discuss how we want to change it? I just briefly went through the whole context of the ordinance. And
So this ordinance actually has a buffer of another $50,000 to $100,000 in PPE for public health. And so, as smaller requests come in, it will, under $30,000, the borough manager will be able to approve those. Or, we can always have a special meeting if the assembly wants to, and gets a lot of requests from people, and let us know at the next meeting, and we can set something up. They reach out to Liz or myself, and we'll talk about it with them and see what we can do to help people. I mean, the point of this money is to help people with the COVID crisis. So,
well, I feel like we could probably just address it at the second reading of this ordinance in the first meeting in December, and maybe by then people will have ideas if they want to bring them to Finance Director Tao or Mrs. Cabrera or one of the assembly members, if that's acceptable. Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if this money does get put into the general fund, if we have left over, can it just sit there, or do we have to, can we just dump it in there, or does it have to be earmarked for something?
well, we would be using it to cover that. It would ultimately go into general fund reserves, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the first reading of ordinance 2020-24? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, the first reading of ordinance 2020-24 passes unanimously. Now we're going to go back to phone call that was dropped or just disconnected, might be a better word, during the persons to be heard part of the agenda related to agenda items. So, Lori, would you please unmute Dave Beebe?
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
You're a little faint, but you're clear.
Okay, thanks. Hi. My name is David Beebe. I'm representing myself. I support the mask mandate and encourage the Assembly to use the same rationale of public process as the resolution we recently passed on the Cake Road. First off, I'm a Vietnam-era veteran trained in the United States Navy as a surgical technician, serving on surgical teams in all the major surgical services, and I served for 5 years in that capacity. During this time, I also moonlighted in civilian hospitals while in the Navy, and after I got out of the Navy, several years in civilian hospitals while I put myself through school.
So I've functioned as a surgical technician for over a decade, and during this time, I've worn a surgical mask for 8 to 12 hours a day in surgery, and the claim that there is a health risk of the mask wear, or there is not a statistically significant risk of wound infection by not wearing masks during surgery is absurd. I'd like to now turn to the Southeast Alaska Landless Corporation claims that there was, quote, no good reason, there was no definitive reason, end quote, that the so-called landless communities were not included in ANCSA, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. The Coast Alaska Regional Nonprofit News Corporation has claimed also, quote, 1993 study by the Institute of Social and Economic Research, or ICER, found no significant difference between the 5 landless communities and others included in ANCSA. No source references to the claim were provided, so I looked for myself. These statements made by these nonprofit corporations that there was no good reason, no definitive reason, nor significant difference between the 5 so-called landless communities and others in ANCSA are verifiably untrue, as documented in the ICER document itself. In the very first paragraph of the preface to the ICER study of the 5 Southeast Alaska communities, ICER concluded the following, quote, natives from these 5 communities were eligible to enroll as at-large shareholders of Sea Alaska, the regional corporation established for Southeast Alaska, but they were not eligible to form village or urban corporations and therefore received no land entitlements, end quote. So now that it has been established that Congress definitively considered these 5 communities in ANCSA, we find the definitive reason in Chapter 3 of the ICER study why these 5 communities were not eligible to receive land entitlements. Back in 1935, Congress seized the recognized lands of the Tlingit and Haida in order to create the Metlakatla Indian Reservation, the Tongass National Forest, and the Glacier Bend National Monument, and they were not returned to the village-based clans, and here's why. Upon achieving statehood, Tlingit and Haida clans went to the Court of Claims against the state of Alaska in 1959. That court determined their claims were valid, and a settlement for those lands were awarded. $7.5 million, which in 2020 dollars is about $78 million. And Tlingit and Haida were charged with management of the settlement of those funds on behalf of its members. Natives are also citizen co-owners of the same lands they received cash settlements for. In fact, no American citizen can claim to be landless because of our national forest system. If this is still not clear, we have the proverbial words from the horse's mouth. Back in 1993, KFSK News Department covered a previous attempt and a series of attempts to privatize public lands of the Tongass and elsewhere. Lee Gorsuch, the director of ICER, who happened to be listening to his radio in the car, stated in a letter dated 7 December 1993 to the KFSK News Director, quote, the story was inaccurate and disappointing. No one was here in ICER was contacted for the story. If you had called me or Steve Colt, we could have pointed out several things that would have improved the accuracy of the story. The study villages were not, however, as you reported, denied all benefits. We did not, as you reported, make a finding that Congress had inadvertently omitted. Thank you for this opportunity to
thank you for your testimony.
I appreciate it.
Sorry about the little misconnection there. Is there anybody else, Clerk Thompson, that was in the queue that was dropped?
Not that I saw, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, maybe we'll have handled all that. So that brings us back to item B under new business. Resolution 2020-24. This is a resolution authorizing the borough manager to approve expenditures directly related to fire damage restoration of the aquatic center not to exceed the insurance policy limits, and to exempt the project from competitive bidding under Petersburg Municipal Code 4.04-040B, emergency purchases. I'd entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lim. Discussion on Resolution 2020-24.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm definitely voting yes for this. I just wanted to, I know Steve, you've received a lot of feedback to kind of keep your foot on the gas on this and really prioritize this for the community. So I just wanted to publicly thank you for prioritizing this and making its repair and the restoration top priority. So thank you, sir.
Okay, any other comments on this resolution? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Resolution 2020-24 passes unanimously. That brings us to the next resolution on the agenda, 2020-25. A resolution amending the expenditure of $778,000 from the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund to $642,136 for the Petersburg School District personal costs in responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency and identifying modifications to the school district's initial request. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Norheim. Any discussion on this? And we talked about this briefly under the supplemental budget item, first reading of that ordinance. So this is money that the school is returning to us that they did not need, if I understand. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, it's a little related to the last ordinance, the one before we voted on about the excess money going into the general fund reserves. Is there a reason that the school can't take this excess funds and put it in their reserves? And just
Jody?
Yes, because you can only use it to cover payroll for emergency workers and first responders.
You have a follow-up, Member Mucci?
Yes, I do. So in that light, is that what will happen to the CARES Act funding that we will put into our general fund reserves if it's not spent?
Well, once it gets put in our general fund reserves, we can spend it however we want.
But I think we're going to pay the wages of the emergency workers, and therefore what we've budgeted will not be used, so that's really what's going to be in the general fund.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions on this resolution? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 2020-25 passes unanimously. Let's take a short break, just for a little 5 minutes or less, whatever it takes to go to the powder room, and I'll be back. We'll start as soon as everybody is back in attendance. Start the meeting. We're on item D under new business. 20-495 is the number. It's Petersburg Borough Public Health Mandate number 5, Borough Harbor Facilities, Vessel Docking and Disembarkment. I would entertain a motion to approve this health mandate.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Norheim. Member Mucci, since you put this on asked to have this on the agenda, do you have any comments?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, thank you. we could talk about this mandate, or I do have a couple of amendments to this. Would it be best to go with the amendments first or have the discussion on the mandate?
Well, you're probably going to it might be clearer to people to maybe make the amendments, and I believe, if I'm looking at this right, are the amendments just to mirror what the governor put forward as far as his health orders?
Yes, I mean, some of the words have changed, from modified to issued. Mandate 10 is, I could read them if you want me to into the record.
Well, I guess we'd have to, technically, Clerk Thompson, would we have to make a motion to amend?
Yes.
And change the language?
Okay.
So I would probably make, and one other question, do the assembly members that are calling in have this?
I emailed it, yes, I emailed it to them.
Okay, so have the assembly members calling in received these emails so you could keep track of what we're talking about?
Jeff, Chelsea, and Dave, did you guys receive the email from me that has public health mandate number 5 and I believe number 9 with some modifications on it?
Yes, I did.
Perfect.
I've got it too, David.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we all have the information in front of us. So, Member Mucci wants to, I believe, make a couple amendments, and I think we could probably address them
all at once.
All at once?
I agree.
So, Member Mucci, please proceed with your proposed amendment.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the first paragraph, I guess for the folks at home, the change of wording here does not change the intent of the mandate. It just brings it into alignment with the governor's mandate. And so in the first paragraph, I'd like to change halfway down the word modified for issued, followed by the two words state health, and strike the words mandate number 10 and replace it with order 6 and health order 8. And on the next line, next to intrastate, include the word intrastate. On the second paragraph, strike the words in the second sentence, strike the word mandate number 10 and replace it with order 6 or health order 8. On the fourth paragraph, under no passenger vessel, that paragraph, strike both of the words mandate 10 in the second line and in the fifth line and replace both of those with order 6 or health order 8. Now on the back, on the second page, first sentence, strike the word mandate number 10 and replace it with order 6 and health order 8, and 5 lines down, strike the word mandate 10 and replace it with order 6 and health order 8. And those are my amendments.
Is there a second to those proposed amendments?
I'll second.
Seconded by Member Norheim. Is there any discussion on this amendment to this mandate by any assembly members?
Yeah.
Member Lim.
Yeah, just a question. If Carl's on, could we have Carl just give us a quick explanation of what Order 6 and Order 8 is for the listening public?
Mr. Hagerman, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Did you hear Member Lim's request?
Yes, I can do that. So the amendments that Member Mucci brought forward, as he said, are to realign the local mandate with the freshly issued health orders that came down from the governor just yesterday. And so health order number 6 is essentially the old health mandate number 10, and it is in regard to international and interstate travel in Alaska. And And health order number 8 is a health order that dictates how intrastate travel within the state of Alaska shall be observed by travelers.
Okay, I have a quick question. On Health Order 8, which adds intrastate travelers to the interstate travelers, these are just health orders from the governor, correct? There are no mandate?
They actually are mandates. They change the wording to health orders, but they have the same effect in law as a mandate.
Interesting.
Yes.
Thank you. So, any other discussion on these, on this proposed amendment? Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're back to the main motion as amended with this new language, replacing former mandate 10 from the state to Order 6 and Health Order 8, which I just thought they were orders. I didn't realize just by changing the word mandate to order, it's still a mandate. So I didn't think so. With that being said, is there any other input? Member Mucci.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make another motion or amendment.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to change the effective date and duration of this mandate to February 28, 2021. And my reasoning for this is that this is a topic that ATIA is currently looking at right now. And their wish is that all the communities in the region have a consistent approach to how small cruise ships and large cruise ships, how they interact with our different communities. It makes it a lot easier for the industry. And my fear is that we're in a rapidly changing environment right now, particularly with 2 very potential effective vaccines. And we might want to take a second look at this.
Okay.
So I'm a little reluctant to put the termination date all the way out to February, all the way out to October of next year.
Okay, we need a second to get the amendment on the floor.
Second.
Seconded by everybody in the room. Member Lynn. We'll use him for the second. Okay, any further discussion by assembly members? And you wanted to change the date to February 28th of 2021?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I thought that's what you said. I'm sure the clerk has it written down accurately. So any other discussion on changing that date? Member Mucci.
Should we vote on the amendment first? And then
We did a vote on your amendment. It passed. Now we're voting on Member Kinsinger's amendment to change the date from October 31st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021, I believe, if I'm keeping track.
Okay, so I guess, Mr. Mayor, the question I have is, no matter what date we put on here, whether it's February 28th, 2021 or October 31st, 2021, we certainly can come back at any time and reconsider and rescind these mandates or change these mandates. I'd just like to know, I guess I'm trying to understand why I understand with the ATA, or I guess it's the Alaska Tourism Association, is looking for some consistency in communities, but I'm trying to figure out for myself why February 28th, because then that, originally when I put this forward, and we can talk about it later on, I was kind of hoping that we wouldn't have to get together every 2 or 3 months to chat about this mandate. I mean, we've revised this. We've passed it in April, and we've talked about it in May, June, and August, and we're talking about it in November. And the intent was, and we can chat about it after we're done with this, but to, we can certainly come back at a later date and change this if it meets, if the community's happy with it. But yeah, that was just my question on the whole thing.
Okay, Member Norheim, your comments on the amendment to change the date?
In regards to moving it more towards February, I would assume that it would give people more hope that maybe it would be done sooner instead of extending it out to a whole nother year, and then everybody's just going to sit around going, oh, God, a whole nother year? I don't think it's going to be any skin off our back to spend a couple minutes talking about it in February as opposed to crushing everybody's hopes for a whole year.
Member Lynn?
Yep, I have a question for Member Kensinger. The cruise ship industry right now is looking at putting together their schedules for next year and what they're intending to do. Would changing the date, February 28th, make a difference in terms of what that scheduling would be, or should we stay with Member Mucci's date, and would that make a difference in the scheduling and what the intent was?
That's a good question, and there's not a real easy answer to it because everybody's kind of, all the plans are up in the air right now, and everybody realizes this is a moving target, and the main desire that I heard, or the main comment that I had from feedback from ATIA is if we pass this ordinance the way it is right now, we don't have a seat at the table with ATIA in the discussion telling them what we'd like to see happen in our region. So that kind of takes us out of the discussion. I'm not for sure whether the borough is a member. I know the chamber is a member, and we'd be willing, or I should say, I could run it by the chamber to see if they'd be willing to work on this with ATIA. And the hope, or at least the one person I talked to about this felt that it's so much is up in the air and so much is changing so fast right now that if we can provide some level of consistency between all the different communities in the region, like have one policy for the entire region, and make it a lot easier for these operators to operate. And I think we all want to, most of us want to see them be able to come back to town again this next summer. And so I kind of want to listen to them as well and see what the other communities come up with, and instead of us just determining our own policy without any interaction with all the other communities that these vessels are transiting to.
Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank
you. Any other comments? Member Norham, did you have a comment? You already did. Chelsea or Jay, any comments on the amendment to move the date?
No, thank you.
Okay. Member Mucci?
Sure.
Member Tremblay.
Thank you. It's funny how I'm almost 50-50 on the dates, just because, as Member Mucci pointed out, we can rescind it at any time. As Member Kensinger pointed out, this would help us be more a part of the consistent conversation, but I don't know. A lot of this is completely out of our hands. This is our attempt at controlling the situation. And as it's written, this mandate is aimed at protecting our broader community and setting guidelines for ways to interact with us in the state of a pandemic. So I think I'll be voting for this. I'm thinking out loud because, honestly, based on my interpersonal contacts in the industry, this is still a total myth of the season rather than reality, and I don't know if this mandate would do anything to change that. So it is what it is.
Okay, thank you. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll probably vote against this amendment. You know, when I was working with the Incident Command group, or with Carl, you know, I originally came up with, like, let's say the 1st of March or May or June, and then we said, well, let's just go to the end of the year. And then we landed on October 31st. I am really comfortable with this Petersburg Borough Public Health Mandate number 5 for vessel docking and disembarkment. This gives us total control over vessels sailing into Petersburg. They have to run their plan through our health officer who, there's protocols that they'll have to abide by. I don't want to lose that control. I mean, I know the tourism, or whatever it's called, ATIA, they're a vital player here, but there's no reason why I don't want February 28th to be the date that drives this. I mean, we still have lots of time to kind of welcome the cruise ships. This intent of this mandate here is not to discourage the visitor industry. It's to kind of say, hey, we want a plan. We'd like to see the visitors come in as long as they abide by our protocols. And the February 28th thing kind of doesn't work for me, but that's fine. I'll be voting for the October 31st thing. So thank you.
Okay. To me, the date, I think I'm going to vote for this amendment because we can always just in a 5-minute conversation, if we're still having, high reports of COVID rates and worried about the travel industry and bringing passengers to town, but they have to follow the protocol. I'm in favor of this amendment, and if there's no other comments, I guess we'll have the clerk call the roll. And this amendment is to change the effective date from October 31st, 2021 back to February 28th of 2021. Clerk call the roll on this second amendment.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to change the termination date of this mandate 5 is now set at February 28th, 2021, and that brings us back to the main motion as amended. Any other discussion on the main motion? So I have a question. I think it's probably been clarified, but I just wanted to bring it up at the meeting that before these 3 mandates were presented to us, I understand that Incident Commander Hagerman was in the process of finalizing almost his green, yellow, red levels of COVID, for the lack of the proper term, and just not, he didn't really consider mandates at the time, and then it was put on the agenda, and then I understand that it was asked of him to write these mandates, and now we have these 3 mandates in front of us. So I support the idea, and this one I will consider voting for. I'm still on the fence, but with that being said, is there any other comments on the mandate 5 as amended? Will the clerk call the roll?
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Okay, mandate 5 as amended and changing some of the language to mirror the governor's health orders passes with a 6-1 vote with the mayor opposed. And that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is Petersburg Borough Public Health Mandate number 8, face coverings. I'd entertain a motion to approve this mandate.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Member Mucci, you asked for this mandate, or this mandate to be put on the agenda as well, so if you'd like to start the discussion, we'll do it like that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I did ask for this to be on the agenda as well as the other one that we'll be talking about. After the last meeting that we had, I kind of went home and I kind of, like the rest of you, probably don't sleep real well after a meeting or with all the stuff that's going on. And, it came, I'm at the realization now that things are, they seem like they're getting worse. And, the school district has done a great job of getting the kids back in school. Businesses are kind of limping forward. We're hearing concerns from the health professionals at the hospital. And I think, while it might not be the most popular mandate in town, we've all received a large amount of mail from folks who support this and understand that, while it's tough, it's not like we're asking people to give a kidney or donate an arm. We're asking people that when they're in a public building and they can't social distance, to just wear a mask. For me, when I go to town, I throw a mask around my neck, and if I run into somebody, I always have it on. I wear it. If I'm out the road walking, I have it in case I run into somebody. But we talk about, somebody mentioned, well, I don't care if you're left, right, or leaning. Somebody mentioned, well, yeah, the governor made his proclamation, and 30 minutes later, the assembly was doing something. Well, that's not how I did this. With the help of city staff and the attorney, we've been working on this since more or less the Tuesday after the last meeting. Because I didn't want to just spring it on the community on a special meeting and say, yeah, let's do this, and not have any public say on this. We're not asking people, or I'm not asking people to wear a mask if you've got pre-existing health conditions. I'm not asking children to wear a mask if the parents don't think it's appropriate for them. I'm not going to tell you how to raise your children. If you have medical conditions, you don't need to wear a mask. Finger pointing, maybe there is finger pointing going on or name calling going on, but that's not my intention. I'm just trying, I keep hearing from people who want to keep businesses open. They want to continue to see, this town kind of get back to where we were before this. And the only way that's going to happen is for us to just do a simple, selfless act for the whole community and wear a mask when you're in a public building or you can't social distance. When the schools shut down, that had a big impact on the community. 12 city staff had to go home and take care of their kids. I don't know what happened with the rest of the community. You hear from the healthcare professionals, if you talk to people up at the hospital, if one or two more nurses goes home with a symptom of COVID, then that's going to it might impact the overall ability of the hospital to operate just for people who need to go to the doctors just for whatever. A lot of my dive training and stuff, I learned to kind of look at a situation and see if there's a way to prevent a situation from happening that wouldn't be healthy to people. And I see this mask mandate as a simple way to think about the rest of us in the community. I'm not about writing a bunch of $500 tickets or whatever. I'm just hoping that we can kind of work together here. Wear a mask if you think you can deal with it. I think the only way we stop or slow this thing down, this virus down, is by taking active measures to do that. And we hear it all the time. Wash your hands. Don't go to work if you're sick. Do your social distancing and wear a mask. That's not. We don't have. That's not a lot. People talk about the right to drive. Okay, well, you don't get a right to drive. You got to take a test, and you got to do a road test. There's certain guidelines for it. When you get in a car, you got to throw your seatbelt on. I mean, there's things you have to do, and I don't think by wearing a mask in limited, in places that we're requesting you to, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. My intent was not to divide the community. My intent is to keep this community moving forward. Nobody wants to shut down the businesses in town. Nobody. I don't want that. I've heard people say, oh yeah, now you want to shut down business. That is not my intent. When you heard the governor on the radio the other day, he was on the radio because he is concerned that his lack of leadership won't say mask mandates. He doesn't want to bite that off. And so it's up to the local communities to kind of deal with that. We probably heard on the news, on the radio, that Wrangell they had an emergency meeting on Thursday and they passed the mask mandate, and they're going to be handing out $25 tickets to people. I'm hoping that the 7 of us will kind of come together here, and whether you believe that the virus is a hoax or it's the news media's fault, we need to do what's best for Petersburg here, and I think this will help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Member Norheim?
I guess I know we're not supposed to have dialogue. My question, because we've asked this before, was do we plan on having the police enforce this and actually hand out fines? You said Wrangell's giving out $25 fines. Do you intend to have the police enforce this mandate and arrest people or hand out fines to people who are not wearing masks in the situations that are covered under here?
Chief Kerr's on the line.
Chief Kerr, would you interject here? I'm not sure. I don't see a fine set up in this, but I wonder if our ordinance 2020-19 we passed has the fine schedule in it that this would apply. So there could be fines issued if the police was going to enforce this. Chief Kerr.
Yes, thank you. So it could be, people could get tickets, but what I thought I heard was Assembly Member Norheim asking Mucci what his intent was for it, not whether or not we were going, what Mucci was going for. But my view on it is, we would rather educate people. And this is a topic that surely divides the community and will upset both sides. So, if it's the will of the assembly for it to be enforced, then we will have to enforce it. But I've already talked with my officers and expressed to them that they need to ask people if they have a medical condition, and if they have one, then we're done with it at that point. So, but yes, we can issue tickets for it.
Okay, does that clarify your question?
It does on that one, yeah.
You have another?
Yeah, there was another thing I just wanted to touch on, and it was mentioning the size of the virus, and it can go through surgical masks and whatnot. And my understanding on reading these things, and this is part of the educating the public part, is that yes, the virus is that small, but it only can exist, from what I have read, in the water droplets, which are actually bigger than the holes in the mask. So the mask does actually catch them. So yes, and personally I think the masks do help. My problem comes from mandating it. And I'm just more on the side of it's your personal responsibility to take care of yourself and your community. And if you don't think masks work, well, that's your choice. But I haven't, and it's all been very confusing trying to read up on all these things and all the states that have done mask mandates, and since I think they work, or I thought they did, I don't even know, because I assumed that the data showed that there would be no spike at some point, but I keep finding in state after state and country after country where they institute the mandate, and then a month or two later, there's the huge spike. And I don't know if that's because people stopped wearing masks or what was in there. There has to be something else in there that is causing this spike, because, I mean, I still wear my mask around when I'm in the grocery store and whatnot, or in the post office, and I won't be voting for this because I believe in personal responsibility, and it's on you to make that decision. And I don't think it's going to hurt anybody to wear a mask. If you walk into the grocery store, the post office, or someplace, a high traffic area, put it on. Do your exercises, eat healthy. Somebody had mentioned the daily vitamins and whatnot. You should take a multivitamin every day. It boosts your immune system. It keeps you healthy. There needs to be an emphasis on good eating and taking care of your body. Somebody had mentioned smoking and drinking, and yes, those are terrible for you. They will drop your immune system, and then if you get it and your immune system is shot because you haven't been taking care of your body, well, guess what? Your numbers increase in mortality. So yeah, it's be responsible for yourself, for your others. I don't want to ask you or mandate to you to do anything. It's up to you, and you should choose to take care of yourself and your neighbors in whatever way you see fit.
Member Glenn?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Member Tremblay.
Oh, I'm on. Member Lynn can go first.
Go ahead. I've called on you. Let's keep the process going.
Me? Okay. Thank you. In regards to Assemblymember Norheim's comment as to how cases spike where mandates exist regarding masking, I think Vermont is a useful example. I've been following them because their population is roughly proportional to Alaska's, even though their geographic size is about the size of Southeast Alaska. And they do have a mask mandate, and the Republican governor just instituted a whole wide range of additional measures to bring their cases down. 71% of their recent cases have been associated with private gatherings. Social gatherings, basically people's bubbles are bigger than they think that they are, and especially being on such a connected road system, it's harder for them to fully transmit. So their governor instituted a broad amount of additional measures to reduce their spike. So their spike is 100 people a day is what counts as a spike for the state of Vermont. And as a reminder that this weekend we had 700 in one day. As a caller mentioned, we have a roughly 500. But I wanted to time travel a little bit to March. I was at a national conference in Texas. That was when official guidance on the virus was still that it was a virus that you got by touch, not by air. So I have these really visceral memories of packing myself into rooms full of people where none of us touched the door handle on the way in. You know, we all kept our hands to ourselves, and we thought we were being so good because we were following some guidance. The conference itself had debated whether or not to go forward at all, and luckily enough people canceled that it made it safer for some of us. My professor from undergrad who attended ended up catching COVID. She still deals with mental fog, which is common among thousands of COVID survivors. So I don't know. I'm sure that was one of the events that contributed to the broad spread of the virus in the United States. Again, that was the first week of March. And then stuff just kind of started shutting down around us. And in April, we all saw the footage of and have heard stories from our friends who live in New York of the ambulances and the morgue trucks and just the total devastation that it brought to the city before they were able to get it in control. But the nation really rallied behind New York and sent medical professionals from around the country to help in their overcrowded hospitals while they dealt with that wave. Right now, we have record hospitalizations in Alaska, Arkansas, Colorado, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Carolina, and New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. Again, that's just record hospitalizations. 42 states are currently in the red on COVID Act now for having uncontrolled spread. And so, again, our cases are rising. There is an average 2-week delay in hospitalization that comes with an increase in test numbers. So while Alaska is dealing with its own spike, Providence has requested a morgue trailer to be prepared for what they might be seeing. Again, they haven't needed it yet, but they are preparing. We're just beginning to see this crescendo in numbers, and that's why we need to be acting on masking now. So I'm very grateful to Assemblymember Michi for bringing this to us, because this is a touchy topic. We've been getting so much feedback on this issue for so long, and there's been so much misinformation that's been a part of it. And, we talk about people being afraid. We talk about how difficult this is. There are people with compromised systems and in high-risk categories who listen to these meetings every single time and hear people call in to talk about how they will refuse to follow public health recommendations. And so I don't know what we as an assembly are supposed to do if not err on the side of public health recommendations in the face of a public that says over and over again that they will not do what they need to do willingly to take care of their neighbors. So the governor's statement about cases rising, we need to be careful, to me that was just such a hollow statement, because he has the power to be acting more forcefully, and he is choosing not to. He is acting it to come back to us. Again, the Republican governor of Vermont just instituted much more sweeping measures on top of what they already have, because of their spike that to us was enviable almost at this point. And, I'm also thinking about the caller earlier who talked about how we all know each other. We're each other's friends. We're the family. We're the neighbors. And reading news stories about these overcrowded hospitals in small rural towns across the country right now, where it's that exact scenario. Their friends, their neighbors are dying in their hospitals, a lot of times because they do not have adequate supplies. Also just because that's the way it is. It's a highly contagious, dangerous disease. And if we can prevent that from happening by wearing masks as a community, I believe that we need to. And this is a really difficult time. My grandmother's dementia has progressed. She's now living in a home because it wasn't safe for her to live by herself anymore. She lives in Seattle, and with the health measures in place and with the unpredictability of the future, I have no idea if I will ever get to see her in person again. So I understand that we're all sacrificing. I know that this is a difficult time. It sucks. I hate this. But for the health of our community, we are indoors, when we cannot social distance, when we don't know the risk factors involved with who else we might be interacting with in close quarters, we need to be erring on the side of caution. So today we are 10 days away from Thanksgiving. If you're in full isolation between now and then, and the other members of your dinner party are planning on it, have a lovely dinner. Be as safe as you possibly can. But if you can't take those kinds of risk assessments into account, if you are in constant exposure to the public, if you have a student coming home from college and they only have that one test, not the second, 14 days later, err on the side of caution, because this could be this is already so hard, this could be so much harder if the worst truly comes to pass. And I'm sorry that so many people I hate knowing that I'm the source of evil for so many people, or darkness, or, believe me, I've heard it, and I have taken it all into heart, and I don't really know what to say to anybody about it at this point. All I can do is do my best and try to speak to the science and to the public health measures, and that's what I believe the goal of the mask mandate is for. And I'm truly sorry for the strife that all of this has brought. It is on all of us to be together in this moment and to go forward as a community, no matter what. And I have faith that we will, but it does mean extending that grace to each other and also continuing to stick to the truth of it and not letting the misinformation overwhelm what we need to be doing. It was good enough 100 years ago. We can do it the same. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have? Member Lynn?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm also the same place as Member Norheim is. That I'm not in favor of doing this. You know, I'm probably the oldest person here and the one that should be banging the chair saying we ought to do this, but I'm not. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that I firmly believe that the last time we put that mandate in effect, we had a reverse effect. And so there were less people that were actually masking after than before. And I think we had much more compliance before, and I really appreciated that. The second reason is that our IC commander, as the mayor talked about, was putting together what I'll call a community protection plan, which was pretty inclusive of all different things, all of the different mandates and stuff we had in effect. And he was working on a set of criteria which would change from what I'll call from green to yellow to orange and red. He's been working on that for a couple of months, and I think he's been doing a good job on it, working with the hospital and the school and stuff. And I'd really like to see that before I'm willing to go any farther with it. I'd like to see what that criteria is and what he comes up with. And that's much more inclusive than just masking. The third thing I do is that I really believe that the protocols we have in place, and we've done even one here tonight, I think has been working. And I'm not willing to take that next step yet. I think, as Member Hornheim said, we need to have, people are going to have to be responsible. I'll wear a mask, and I continue to do so. And that's not going to change. And with that, I'll yield.
Okay, Member Stan Greger or Kinsinger, do you want to, do you have any comments on the mask mandate?
I'll chime in, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, a couple things. One, I'll kind of briefly touch on something Member Lynn said. From my own perspective, I wasn't super gung-ho about having this on the agenda tonight. I've been following Director Hagerman's plans for, as Member Lynn referred to it, as a community protection plan, and I think tying this into that somehow, or some sort of, as Member Lynn mentioned, criteria for if we're in this place, meaning X amount of cases, or this color coding, I'll trust Director Hagerman to sort that out, to kind of, refer to that for action. But that's not the place we're in right now, because this is before us tonight, so I'll address it as such. For those who know me, I've reached out, called, texted, and tried to make heads or tails of how to proceed at this point. Those who have called in and said, we don't have cases here right now. What's the urgency? I don't argue their point. I've wrestled with that same thing. We are in arguably the safest place in the United States right now. I've got friends in Wisconsin, Colorado, New York, college friends scattered out who, family members who've been hospitalized, people have been sick, things that I find really scary and people I worry about and care about. But that isn't us. That is not us, which is pretty awesome. And maybe that's caused some of my wrestling with that. Something that's come to mind, though, I think that's really settled in for me and why I'm inclined to vote for this is, starting this weekend, college students will be coming home from around the country. Most colleges are shutting down at Thanksgiving and not going to Christmas break and have a long break. So we're going to get 100, ish kids coming back with me too. I'm just spitballing there, but a bunch of folks coming home. And that poses increased risk because, as we know, the incubation period is from a week to 2 weeks, and that's subjectively increased risk. And we'll be welcoming those young people back home. And so as far as timing on a mask requirement, I think it's good timing. Again, not what I originally had in mind, but I can wrap my brain around the idea of mitigating risk. And in terms of risk mitigation, I think of being proactive or reactive. I think some of the problems some of the other communities have had, I would cite Sitka, Juneau, and Ketchikan. So by the time they'd kind of instituted some of these things, community spread was already flying around. It doesn't do a whole lot of good to put a mask mandate in place when community spread is already, reach beyond our control. I don't want Petersburg to be that way. I think the lifeline of our town right now is going to be keeping our schools open for kids and families, our hospital are functioning as well as possible, and business is open. We all want to support local businesses right now. And although I freely admit, I don't generally like wearing my mask when I go places, I do. Why? Because I want to be able to keep our town functioning. Yeah, is it a perfect solution? Nope, absolutely not. It isn't. But it's the best we've got right now. And I don't like mandating people wear masks indoors. I wish we weren't in this place, but as Member Tremblay touched on, the cases are 700 today. It's a lot. It's not, and we're connected very closely by 2 planes a day, and that can't be ignored. One thing I'd briefly add to that is I would like to revisit this when Carl has his community action plan in place and potentially tweak it to tie into that. That's not where we're at tonight, and I feel comfortable bringing it up there. But I would like to make one amendment to this, so bear with me as I pull it up. I would like to, in the second paragraph, amend it to remove the language after it says, 1, when inside any building open to the public, or any building not open to the public when present for work purposes and physical distancing of 6 feet from coworkers can't be maintained, and then there's a comma. I would delete from there to the end of that sentence, meaning removing the outdoor mask regulation. I've spent a lot of time on the harbors and docks, spent a lot of time in parking lots. Research has shown that outdoor transmission risks are extremely low. I pass people on the floats all the time, and I'm not concerned about sharing air with them as we go past. So I would propose that amendment.
Second.
And that is to remove the language after number 2, or is that?
No, to remove all of number 2, Mr. Mayor. After the comma, the word maintained, comma, and when outside. All of that went outside, just that sentence, including harbor floats and parking lots, that whole long sentence.
Okay.
You got that, Debbie?
Yep.
Yes, I do.
I think we do. So is this, and Member Tremblay seconded it. So is there any discussion on the amendment to remove Section 2 and the action that this mandate will take?
So,
Member Mucci.
thank you. I'm just trying to follow along here. So, is it number 2 under the directive or in the second paragraph?
It's under the action is what this mandate would actually do. So it's under the introduction, basically, Member Mucci.
Okay.
So it's in paragraph 2.
Okay. There you go.
You find it?
I'm getting there.
Paragraph 2, number 2.
Okay. When outside any building is situated.
Correct.
And Member Stanton-Greger, I'd just like to say, if this does pass, I would also remove the number 1, because it would be the only part of that statement.
Absolutely. We're removing the numerical clarifier there. Absolutely.
Okay, any other Assembly members have any comments on the amendment as proposed? While we're waiting. Member Norheim? Member Lynn? Member Kinsinger or Member Tremblay?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I support this amendment, and the reason is quite simple. If you're shopping, just like a person that has, and I contacted several businesses today and asked if somebody didn't want to wear a mask in your building because they felt it was detrimental to their health or they had anxiety about wearing a mask, most of the businesses that I contact are set up to provide delivery and curbside pickup, which means just like a person that doesn't want to go into a business because they're afraid of getting exposed to people that might have COVID, people that are afraid that by wearing a mask that's going to cause them physical harm, they don't have to go into that business either. We are set up in town right now to make this all happen. So if you don't feel comfortable having your kids wear a mask, if you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to go into that establishment and shop. That establishment will bring the product to the curb or they'll deliver it to you. So I think this is a good compromise, and I know it doesn't solve all the issues. There are a lot of people that don't want to see a mandate put on, but I think this goes a long ways to solving that issue. And so, yes, I'll be supporting this amendment, and I will also support this mask mandate. And I don't think we need to go there on fines. I think Chief Kerr was correct that maybe what we need to do is, if anything, just be an educational item for people. I know one thing that a lot of businesses struggled with when we had the mask mandate back in the spring was it just created a lot of confusion. And it put a lot of onus on the businesses because they were the enforcers, because they said, no, you can't come in here unless you wear a mask, because that's what the state told us we have to do. Well, if we have a mask mandate in the community, what that means is it's no longer on the business to be an enforcer of that regulation. That enforcer is now the borough or the state. And so I think that improves the situation and makes it a lot easier for people that are trying to run businesses in town. And like I said, if you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to go into the business and shop. They'll deliver it to you, or they'll take it out to the curb.
Okay, any other comments on the amendment?
So, Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification.
Member Mutri.
Thank you. So we would just be removing most of Section 2, stopping at the word floats.
We would remove all of Section 2, is what the amendment is.
From the comma forward.
From this comma forward.
This, we would go in.
To the end, yes.
To the end of the sentence.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure masks and face coverings, would still be in there.
So
you're correct.
Thank you.
Have all the assembly made their comment on this mandate? If they have, then I will interject my thoughts and.
But the amendment.
I would have. What's that?
We're on the amendment, not the amendment.
Oh, we're on the amendment. Okay. Well, if there's no other comments on this amendment, clerk call the roll on the amendment.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, so the amendment passes, and we're removing all of we're removing the numerical number 1 because there's only going to be one issue here, and or one
Instance.
description, and all of number 2. So that's the amendment. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. So any comments from the assembly on the main motion as amended? Member Mutri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Kinsinger, we've already had a pretty extensive testimony. Member Kinsinger?
Yes, I'd like to make one other amendment, or actually 2 other amendments, and it's in where the directive does not apply to, and it's under number 2. It says any person with chronic pulmonary or breathing conditions. I'd like to change that to chronic pulmonary, comma, breathing, and or medical conditions.
Oh, that's true.
Okay, we'll do one amendment at a time. So is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, second from Member Norheim. Any discussion on that amendment to add the medical conditions in that number 2 under the directives does not apply to, and that would be breathing.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, my reasoning for that was a discussion I had with a community member that pointed out that certain individuals have other types of medical conditions that aren't described as pulmonary or breathing conditions that can't wear masks. So that just includes them.
Okay. Any other discussion on this amendment? Add that language? You have that, Debbie? Okay, clerk call the roll.
Dave?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Okay, that amendment passes unanimously. And Member Kinsinger, you had another amendment, or was that it?
Yes, I have one other amendment, and I guess this could be considered under the paragraph that we just amended, number 2 that we deleted. And what I'd like to put under there is any community gathering, outside gathering of more than 50 people, masks are mandatory. And my reasoning for that is I'd really like to have a tree lighting ceremony next week in the community. And we're trying to make a way for it all to work, but we need to have a mask mandate to make it work. So I'd like to propose that as an amendment.
So you want to go back to the header or the introduction, basically, and at the end of number 1, add this amendment?
Yes, add a number 2, that any community gathering, outside gathering of more than 50 people, a mask mandate is required. Or this mandate is, a masking would be required.
Okay, so is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Mucci. Okay, so any discussion on that amendment, or that addition? Member Lynn.
I have a question for Member Kessinger. When you say community gathering, does that include all churches? Or does it include the...
No, it's an outside, no. Sorry.
Outside. Does it include going to the grocery store? Well, that's a community gathering. How are you defining community gathering, I guess?
Outside.
This is outside? Is that the language?
Outside gathering.
Okay, all right.
Yes, outside gathering of more than 50 people, sorry.
Okay, any other discussion on that amendment, adding that, any gathering over 50 people outside is mandatory masking? Is that correct? Is that how the amendment is? Is that what you wrote down, Debbie?
It is, yes.
Okay, if there's no other discussion on this amendment, to add that as a number 2, I guess, so then we'll probably put the number 1 back in. Just a minor technicality. Clerk, call a roll on this amendment.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that passed unanimously. I was almost asleep. Not quite. So now we're back to the main motion with the 3 amendments. Member Norheim.
I have one more, a amendment.
Propose it.
To change the age of children from age of 2 to 3.
Is there a second?
Second. I'll second.
Okay, discussion.
Well, anybody with kids who are 2 or 3 will know that this probably is a good idea, because not all kids who are 3 years old are going to be sitting there keeping the mask on. Most notably my daughter, who thinks it's funny to just pull it off and run around with it when I tell her to try and keep it on. So I just feel like while I try to keep the mask on her, I would not like to incur a fine because she thinks it's funny to take it off and run away.
Yeah. So is there any other discussion on the amendment to change the age in this masking mandate from 2 to 3? Kids under 3 don't have to wear masks, is that what it is?
Yeah. Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stanton Greger.
Yeah, just to Member Norheim's comment, Chief Kerr made it abundantly clear fines are not the goal there. I know you're probably making that comment in jest, but fines are not being issued to little kids for masks, just for a point of clarification.
Any other discussion on this amendment to change the age from 2 to 3 before masks are required? Clerk, call roll on this amendment.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that amendment passes unanimously. Any other amendments proposed by Assembly members for masking mandate number 8? Any comments on the main motion as amended? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting for this mandate. We've heard lots of comments, both, on both sides of this issue. For me, I'm choosing to err on the side of caution. I mean, I'd feel horrible if we didn't do anything as an elected body. this mandate will help me, and I'll feel better about it. I think we're not talking about personal responsibilities, we're talking about a community responsibility, and I think we're all in this together. We want the schools open, we want the businesses open, and we want the hospital to continue on, and this is just one of several things we can do to make that happen. So I'm all in support of it, and I want to thank everybody for the discussion.
Any other input from other assembly members? Member Norheim.
One quick thing. It seems like this is probably going to pass, but I would just like to ask, as Assemblymember Lynn pointed out, that when we mandated last time, that less people started wearing masks. And I have a feeling that that's because there are not an insignificant amount of contrarians in this town. And I would ask that if it does pass, if you could just wear the mask when you go to the post office or the grocery store, and maybe not be contrarian, maybe just this once, and that's all I got.
Okay, if there's no other comments by assembly members, I'll give my opinion. Like I said earlier in our discussion about the harbor mandate and how this was put forward, and Mr. Hagan was working with his level of thresholds that we would reach different areas. I would have rather seen that come before this mandate. I know there's outbreaks all over the country and in our state and in our neighboring communities. Currently in Petersburg, we are lucky. I don't want to mandate something that I think is going to stir up the public, and I think that's what this is going to do. I agree, COVID is a serious virus. So I will be not voting for this mandate. With that being said, I think all the Assembly has had plenty of input on this. Unless you've got something urgent, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Bob?
No.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, the masking mandate passes with a 4-3 vote, with members Assembly Lynn and Mayor Jensen opposed. That brings us to the next proposed mandate. Let me get back to the right page, and this is Health Mandate Number 9, Intrastate Traveler Testing. This agenda item was requested by Assemblymember Mucci. If approved, Public Health Mandate Number 9 will require all intrastate travelers arriving in Petersburg at the James A. Johnson Airport or the Alaska Marine Highway System Ferry Terminal to be tested prior to or upon arrival. The mandate will remain in effect in place concurrently with the state Alaska Mandate 10, but that language should be changed. I guess it would be either Order 6 or 8, whichever applies, so that, maybe we can make amendment to that, but unless earlier rescinded by the Borough Assembly. I'd entertain a motion to approve this mandate.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Kinsinger. Member Mucci, you introduced this mandate, so I will let you speak first if you have input.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to amend this intrastate travel testing mandate number 9. I have 3 additions. Would you like them all at the same time, or they're...
Well, there's actually would be 4 if we change the mandate 10 to Order 6 as well. Would be the highlighted yellow are your proposed amendments?
Yes. Under number...
Let's do one at a time.
Okay. So the first amendment I'd like to discuss would be changing under the whereases. Now, not the warehouses, but the 8, all the stipulations there on number 4. It reads non-Alaska residents. Strike the word mandate 10 and replace it with health order 6.
Okay, is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
Motion's been made, second. Any discussion on that? That's basically just to mirror the governor's health order. Or change it from a mandate to a health order, which is a mandate, I guess. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Dave?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My second amendment is to insert item 12, which reads, the provisions of this mandate shall not apply if application would delay or limit emergency travel into the Petersburg Borough by law enforcement officers, healthcare workers, or personnel from the Office of Children's Services.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Norheim to add language under Section 12. Did everybody hear the amendment? It's written. You have the email that has it written. So, any discussion on the amendment? Basically, the amendment would not prohibit law enforcement, Office of Children's Services, or emergency travel into Petersburg. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that second amendment passes with adding that language under Section 12. And Member Michi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After number 12, I'd like to add number 13, which reads, commercial fishing vessels, seafood harvesters, and seafood processing workers, to the extent that the testing requirements of this mandate exceed those of the state health order applicable to such workers, the state health order shall govern.
Second.
Is there any discussion? So this language means that this mandate requires these people to test? Is that what it is? This addition, this to the commercial fishing vessels, seafood harvesters, processors, workers, to the extent that the testing requirements of this mandate exceed those of the state health order. Such workers, so I don't quite...
Yeah. The state would override.
The state override?
Yes.
Yes, oh, okay, got it. Okay. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Jay. He got booted, so I'm hoping he's back. Are you on there, Jay?
He hasn't dialed back yet.
Okay, I know he's on his way back. If we can hang for a second.
May as well try to make it a 5-hour meeting like the last one.
Yes.
Important topics, though.
While we're waiting on Jay, did order number 6 have from the state have a recension date on it? Do you remember? I don't remember.
I don't. I'd have to look.
I don't remember. I'll have to ask Carl.
So, Lori, Member Stanton Greger says he's stuck in the phone bank and no one is answering.
It's a tough one.
I'm going to go ahead and try and dial out to him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's like purgatory. Stuck in the phone bank.
Somebody in the room.
You were asking about Health Order 8?
I think he said 6.
6. Oh, and Mayor Jensen, so the health order, it was Attorney Heidemann who clarified for us that at the end of each health order it says that the order carries the full weight of law. So it's basically a mandate. Just didn't want to use the word.
Okay, I dialed Mr. Greger, but he didn't seem to join. Let me try again.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to continue since we'll still have a quorum, and hopefully Member Stanton Greger can connect.
So if I can answer that question. Health Order number 6 is in effect until the state rescinds its public health disaster emergency.
Till it rescinds the...
Till the declaration is over.
Okay, so where were we? We're on voting for the language in number 13, correct? And we just didn't get a vote for Member Stanton Greger.
That is
passes
correct.
Unanimously, 6-0.
Okay.
So we're on 14. Member Mucci, is this another amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is. Section 14, it would strike the number 12 and replace it with 14. And we would strike in the second sentence the word mandate 10 and replace it with order 6.
So is there a second?
Second.
Is this so we're striking 12? Not this number 12, is it?
Yeah.
The one we...
Well, no.
No.
The original number 12.
That's now going to be a number 14.
Number 14 on your...
Okay. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
So, Member Mucci.
Yeah, maybe we could have Carl kind of give us an explanation on, or do you want to wait till we get this all?
Well, we can pass this.
Okay.
And I have a question for Mr. Hagerman as well.
Okay.
Okay, Jay's line is now open.
Member Stanton Greger, are we back? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I could hear you all there for like the last 3 minutes, but no one could hear me, so glad to be back.
Okay, well, we passed the addition of the language in 13 with a 6-0 vote. Would you like to vote?
I'm a yes.
Okay, 7-0. Now we're on item 14, and there's been a motion made and a second. We've had a little bit of discussion. Any discussion from any other assembly members on this item 14? Clerk, call the roll.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so are there any other amendments to be proposed by any other assembly members?
Before I propose amendment, I have a question for Member Mucci. Would we be better off on there where we say until rescinded by the Assembly, as to ask for a review of, if rescinded by the state, that we would review it at that time? I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So,
did you get your answer?
Yeah. I don't know. At least I'll ask again to take a look at it if the state changes their minds where I was at.
Yep.
I have to look for just a second, the wording on it.
It basically says that it will remain in place concurrently with the State of Alaska Health Order 6 unless rescinded earlier by the Assembly.
So if the state
Well, it doesn't say earlier.
on.
It says rescinded by the Assembly.
True.
But
But, so to me, it means it will remain in place concurrently with order number 6, but if order number 6 no longer, that's how I read it. Maybe we should ask.
I didn't read it.
I agree.
Yeah.
If the state's order 6 is gone, then this disappears as well, unless we decide to rescind it before the state gets rid of.
That's how I read it.
Okay, I'd be okay, yeah, all right.
That's the way I interpret it.
Okay, good, All right, I'm okay then.
So, okay, we've made these amendments. Are there any other amendments proposed to the intra-state traveler testing? Okay, I have a question. I think maybe Member Lynn does as well, but I have a question for Member Hagerman about something on this intrastate travel testing at the airport.
He's still on the line.
Are you still with us, Carl?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, was in a conversation, and I can't recall who it was with, but it was about this intrastate travel testing and having it performed at the airport. And it was something to do with what the governor was talking about paying for this. Who's going to be responsible for paying for the test for intrastate traveling as travelers being tested? Is that on the state's dime, or is that our responsibility?
The short answer is the state is going to pick up that cost, and the long answer is that the state, in the old mandate 10, did have an allowance for intrastate travelers to test at the airports that they've contracted testing services at. And during the rewrites of the health orders, there were some changes in the language that made me worry that would no longer be the case. So I did call the state emergency operations center and talk to the state operations chief today about that question, and he assured me that that would not change, that the option on the travel declaration form for now health order number 8, health order number 6 for interstate travel would still be there for passengers to select option number 3, which means they're an intrastate traveler and they have chosen to test. And they select that, and then they will be able to be tested at the airport at no charge.
Okay, and if you don't fill that out, then you have to pay for the test?
Well, yes, you have to fill out the travel declaration form.
Okay. Any other questions of Carl while he's here? Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was just going to have Carl just elaborate a little bit more on the additions that we made to the health mandate number 9, number 12, and 13, if you could, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the additions that were suggested today, and the provisions of the mandate addressing not delaying or limiting travel for law enforcement officers, healthcare workers, or OCS workers, that is a provision that is in the health order. And so bringing it over into this one, we want to avoid any conflict with the state's mandate. So that was the reason for that. And then similarly, for the other one regarding commercial fishing vessels, seafood harvesters, and seafood processing workers, there is another health order that addresses how those fishing industry workers need to be processed when they're traveling, and it's very lengthy and very involved. And so this, again, just eliminates any conflict between our local intrastate travel mandate and the state's health order.
Thank you. Clarify everything. Any other questions, Carl? Member Lynn has a question, I believe.
Yeah, Carl, did in your discussions, was the supplies we need to do the testing, they're forthcoming, and you don't see, or what you've heard, you don't see any problem with with future lag time or not having available testing kits, etc.?
For the testing that is completed at the airport, those are all send-out tests, and so the swabs and the supplies that go along with that mode of testing are in good supply, and we don't worry about those. It's the rapid testing supplies for the Cepheid machines. Those are very hard to come by right now, and so when you hear anybody from the EOC or the medical center talking about limited testing supplies, they're generally talking about the Cepheid cartridges, and which like I said, are very hard to come by right now. But the send-out test kits are readily available, and I do not think that we have any issue with supply of those items.
Thank you.
Any other questions while Carl is on the phone? Okay, thank you. Is there any other, thank you, Carl. Is there any other discussion on the Mandate 9 as amended?
Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I asked for this to be on the agenda today. Same rationale, a lot of traveling going on. I think it's just incumbent on elected officials to kind of make sure the community is doing all we can to kind of limit the virus in town. We heard earlier from a constituent who talked about all the viruses that are around us, but that's true. But this COVID-19 virus is the one that's causing all the problems here. Not just here. I mean, I use the word here as, I guess, nationally, but that's the one we're worried about right now. I think whatever we can do to limit COVID from coming into town, we can't limit it, but if we know it's here and we can isolate folks who might have the virus after they've come to town, I think it's helpful. Again, we talked about being proactive as opposed to reactive. I mean, the state's already working this way, and I just think it's important for Petersburg to take care of, Petersburg. That's why I put this forward. It was just, hate to use the word, another tool in the toolbox, but it's just another way of testing in town. So, thank you.
Okay, any other input from Assembly members on Mandate 9? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Dave?
Yes.
Okay, so Mandate 9 passes with a 5-2 vote with Assemblymember Norheim and Mayor Jensen opposed. That brings us to item G, 20-498, Unrecognized Southeast Alaska Native Communities Recognition and Compensation Act. I asked for this to be on the agenda. We've all been following this somewhat. We talked about it, I don't know if it was 2 months ago, but quite a while back, and we had questions that we needed answered, I thought. I guess before I go any farther, I'll entertain a motion to approve this request for a letter.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Mucci. Anyway, back to my reasoning for having this on here. Liz Cabrera had some questions, I had some questions, and we sent them to our lobbyists. They were sent to John Crowther at Burkowski's office, and we didn't get answers. And so when I heard, we got answers to some stuff, vague answers to certain issues. So when I heard on the 10th that Senator Burkowski had introduced this bill on the Senate side, and Congressman Young intended to do so, which he did on the 11th or the 12th, day after Veterans Day, I thought we should look into it. So I was told that the intent was to try to move this bill in the lame duck session, and which is scheduled to end December 10th. So I figured we should try to act. So I put it on the agenda, kind of open-ended, does the Assembly want to take a position on this? So I've talked with our last Friday, Sebastian O'Kelly, our federal lobbyist, and John Crowther from Senator Murkowski's office, the manager, Liz Cabrera, and myself had a conversation, and we got clarification to some of the answers that we had in the past about transfer of assets in the our particular land selection area around Petersburg. Forest Service cabins was one of my questions, and those would be transferred to the ownership of the corporation if this bill went through, as well as the administration site, the roads, the log transfer facility, and the dock, all the infrastructure basically in the red hash mark area on the map, selection map. So I'd asked the lobbyist, because he heard all the concerns and the conversation with Murkowski's office, his representative. So he drafted this letter, we critiqued it, and this is the letter we have. And basically what it's asking is kind of to have more public input and hold this off till the next session of Congress, which I believe starts after the first of the year. There was some language in the bill. The bill was included on our agenda packet, the language in the bill. It says that they're going to allow recreational hunting and subsisting with reasonable restrictions. And I brought that up in that conversation Friday. And reasonable restrictions can be interpreted many ways. And if the landowner imposes a reasonable restriction, it's up to the person that's trying to access to prove that it's not reasonable. So anyway, there were just some concerns I thought we should address as a community, and there hasn't been any community input. There is a hearing on that committee, the Energy Committee, on Wednesday, the 18th at 10:30 Alaska time. They're not taking public testimony. The testimony is by invitation only, but you can comment before, and this letter would be entered into the record if we approve to send it today. And then people that would want to send comments, pro or con, can send it to Senator Murkowski's office, and you have 2 weeks, so you have till December 2nd to send a formal email to Senator Lisa Murkowski. That I will give, I think I already gave the clerk that information, and if you want to get involved in this committee hearing on Wednesday, there's a way to address it. And I gave the clerk the information, I believe, and I'll find it in my paperwork here and make sure she has it. She can put it on her website so people can access it. So without reading the letter, it's just asking for more, issuing our concerns and asking for a little bit, just pump the brakes a little bit on this and give time for public comment. So any other discussion on this letter? Member Narheim?
I'd just like to ask, was 50 years not enough time for public comment?
Well, I mean, it's been discussed a number of times, in my opinion, but when you actually see the language and the legislation and what public lands with infrastructure improvements are going to be conveyed, I consider it a little bit different than raw land that was issued, I believe, in the 1971 settlement.
Okay.
Member
Mr. Mayor?
Lynn, Member Lynn has the floor, Member Tremblay, and then you can interject. Thank you.
When I read the latest version of the bill, it specifically talks to non-commercial uses that could still be allowed, but some of when you look at the selections that were in it, there are many good places, there are roads that pass through there that really should maintain public access all the way through. So if you have, the way I'm reading it, if you have a commercial vehicle of some sort, whether it be a bus or what have you, or dump truck, what have you, you then could not, unless it's provided by the corporation, to do that. And I have an amendment or so here to the letter to put in there. I also have, in August, we sent, I don't remember, I believe we sent to, and Liz put together, there was about 20 questions we had. There was about 5 of them, or 6 of them, that we still don't have any kind of answers for, that I think would make a difference on where I would stand on that bill. And my question today to the manager was, do we have or have we pursued that? The answer is yes, and they've never got back to us. I think the same thing that the mayor's saying.
Just to follow up on that, we did ask for numbers, and even our borough attorney had said, one of the questions was how will this affect secure rural school funding and payment in lieu of taxes funding? And insignificant, but is what they said, but we asked John Crowther for why can't we come up with numbers? It'd be nice to have numbers. And so I don't know if we'll get that answer or not. So that's what Member Lynn, I think, is talking about. So you were proposing an amendment?
I have 2 amendments.
Or in addition to the letter?
Yes. First paragraph, 3rd line down, where it says, respectively request that, and where they have, I would like to cross out they and put our comments in place of it. So it would read, I respectfully request that our comments be included as part. When I say our comments is, Petersburg Assembly.
Okay, and they will accept this as an email.
Right.
For the hearing. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our comments, strike they. Is there a second to that proposed amendment?
Yes.
Okay, a motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Mucci to strike they in the 3rd sentence of the 1st paragraph and add that our comments.
Yes.
Any discussion on that? Clerk, call the roll on that amendment.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that amendment passes unanimously to change that language. And Member Lynn, you had another?
I do. A 2nd page, 3rd line down, where it says protect public access in the middle of the line there. I would like to strike public and then put in place of it, put both commercial and non-commercial access.
Commercial.
So it would read, would be able to protect both commercial and non-commercial access.
I'll second it for the...
Okay, I just want to mention that in the language in the bill, it talks about commercial ventures, specifically guiding, people that have guiding permits in the bay.
For a 10-year period.
Well, if this passes, whatever agreement the guide had with the Forest Service at the time that this passes, had 3 years left, for instance, that would convey to the corporation when that 3 years is gone, he has one more 10-year period, he, she, whoever, and then the guide is no longer allowed in the corporation land. So it's been moved by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Mucci to remove public and add commercial and non-commercial?
Yeah, both commercial and non-commercial access.
Discussion on that, Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So under non-commercial, public would land in the non-commercial definition?
I'm sorry.
The word, when we go commercial / non-commercial, the word public would be part of the non-commercial definition?
Public's being removed.
I would remove and just say commercial, non-commercial. What I'm specifically getting at here is the fact that there are roads that are included in these various parcels that are cut off from, they're public lands on both sides. If those particular other lands are selected by the corporation, there can be no public traffic across them. It does not, the bill specifically does not talk about commercial traffic across those roads at that point through the native land, if they became native. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So why not just include the words commercial/non-commercial with the word public?
I'm okay with that.
Always leave the public in there.
Leave public in.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so just not strike, but add commercial and non-commercial.
Right.
And
Public, comma, commercial and non-commercial access.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
okay, any other comments on adding that language in the third sentence on the first paragraph on the second page?
Did Chelsea have something?
Chelsea, you had a comment? Sorry, Chelsea.
Okay, I believe.
Member Tremblay?
Yeah. I guess my comment was, did everyone else receive this at 2 o'clock today? Is that when everyone else was reading it too?
This letter?
We had the meeting on Monday with the delegation, or not the representative from Senator Murkowski's office, our lobbyist, the manager and I, and over the weekend there was communication, and then this morning I was talking to Brad Gilman, our other federal lobbyist, and asked them to put some language together for this. I got it at like noon, so, and then it was critiqued and gone over. So I guess if the Assembly doesn't think we've had time enough to address this and take action on this tonight, I will call for a special meeting, and we will address it before, so it has time to get to the public hearing, the committee hearing on Wednesday. So if that's I'm kind of sensing that, and if that's the way we want to go, then that's fine with me. We've already discussed it. We've got the letter. Go ahead, Member Tremblay.
Thank you. That was my thought on this, was not only ourselves, but the broader public as well, being able to get a chance to look at it, due diligence. I understand the urgency and appreciate the work going into it, but given the importance of the issue and the broad ranges of perspectives that we represent as the borough, I wanted to try to make sure we gave it the due diligence and the time that it needed. So I would appreciate a special meeting on this topic.
Make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion for a special meeting to discuss the legislative legislation letter to Senator Murkowski at the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. I propose tomorrow evening at 6 p.m.
When is the hearing?
That is an open question, open to amendment, and thoughts and input on that.
I guess the motion could be just to not approve this letter until we have time for public comment and have a due notice. And we only have to notice the meeting 8 hours, but we are 24 hours, so we can notice it. I believe I talked to the clerk about this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie. 8 hours is the only notice we need.
Which is for an emergency meeting. I'm now thinking in my head. And do we consider this an emergency meeting?
No.
What's the other deadline? 24 hours?
I believe it's 24 hours.
So then we would have to do it Wednesday morning.
Yes.
I realize it's a short time crunch, but if we don't make a comment at this meeting, the comment period will be over by December 2nd, and we won't have time to take official action on it.
Is Wednesday morning 8 o'clock acceptable?
It is to me. If we can notice it first thing in the morning. So anyway, we need a second to your motion to not address this evening and address it at a future date.
I'll second, just for the point of conversation.
So Member Mucci seconded your, assuming your motion was just to postpone the action on this until there's time for public input.
Yeah.
The Wednesday morning?
I have a question.
Member Bucci.
And so the public hearing is what date?
Public hearing is Wednesday, the 18th at 10:30 a.m.
Okay.
And there's a link in an email I sent to the clerk. If the person wants to call and listen, you can.
Okay. Did you have anything?
10.
So,
Is that 10:30, not 8?
Pardon me? The meeting on Wednesday is at 10:30, and if we have to notice a special meeting 24 hours in advance, and we don't address this evening, which is doable, we address it first thing, first thing Wednesday morning would be the soonest we can address it, and email this to the senator or their committee.
Yes, I was just trying to say 8 o'clock doesn't work because I have to bring my kids to school at 8, and my daughter doesn't start school till 8:15. So 9.
All we need is a quorum.
Okay.
I may not make it, if we're going to do it, I may not make it in because of the tides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll be able to attend. So the idea here is to take this amended letter and put it on our website, get it somewhere so people can comment on it, and have our meeting on Wednesday morning and hear comments from the community about it, and
advertise it on KFSK and on our website.
Okay.
Number 9.
So we're going to go with 8.
I have a question of Member Kinsinger, Stanton Greger, and Tremblay. Would you be available at 8 o'clock Wednesday morning?
Mr. Mayor, yes. Negative for Stanton Greger.
And yes, I'm available between 8 and 9:30.
Member Mucci.
Yes.
So that would give us just a quorum. What time could you make it, Member Norheim?
9 o'clock.
That's cutting it pretty close when the meeting starts at 10:30. I guess.
Could we move it to Thursday? I just think it would be in poor taste to have a meeting when your only tribal member is unavailable for comment on this. I won't be there.
Well, we won't move it to Thursday. If that was the case, we would just call a special meeting sometime in the week where it worked for everybody and not get this in front of the committee that's hearing it. And it would just be a later email to the committee.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Tremblay?
Yeah, just a suggestion. We already had a pretty substantial list of questions from Borough staff that were really getting into the details. Could we send those questions to the hearing, which is probably going to be attempting to answer those questions, unless I'm wrong? Would that be a suitable substitute between now and Wednesday morning, giving us time for a fully fleshed out statement by the December 2nd deadline?
We have had these questions submitted to Senator Bukowski's office since August of this year, and still don't have answers to all the questions, even after a 45-minute long phone conversation Friday morning.
Yes, I guess my point is that if we submit the questions to a broader hearing where more people are there, I guess I'm trying to understand what the purpose of this hearing is, if not to find answers to questions, and so we'd be sending questions to be part of that, unless I'm misunderstanding the purpose of the meeting.
Without giving you the exact language and the communication with Sebastian O'Kelly on this, they are not accepting public comment at this hearing. You could email your positions or concerns. It's just by invitation only, so I don't think that this committee will be answering the questions. I think there's like 11 or 12 or 13 other bills that are going to be talked about in this hearing, so the time is very limited. So that's why I want to try to get this letter to that committee hearing. And this, this bill could take quite a while to pass. I mean, but it seemed like it was on a fast track. That's why I wanted some public comment.
does Member Tremblay have a motion on the table?
She has a motion, it's been seconded by Member Mucci to not address this evening, basically, and then that's when I would call for a special meeting. And I guess we have a quorum that would like Member Norheim to be able to be there, and if he can't be available till 9, I don't know how soon we'd have to submit this.
See if I can get somebody to take my kids to school for me on Wednesday morning. Mom.
I knew this was going to be, I anticipated something like this happening this evening. I should have just mentioned it right off the bat. It was nice to have the discussion. Clerk Thompson has her hand up.
I'm just wondering if Member Tremblay would feel any differently if I were to take a minute and read this letter aloud, and then you guys move forward and take action.
My concern is that the time for public comment this evening has already passed, and the broader community hasn't had a chance to read it, and at this point going on to hour 4 of this meeting, I would like to be able to give it more effort than I was able to. My mind is in other agenda items this evening, so personally I would still prefer the special meeting.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, though.
You bet.
Member Mitchell, do you have a...
No.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor and a second to not address this tonight. So, clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
No.
Jeff?
Can I get a point of clarification here? So we're just not going to talk about this tonight, but we are still going to have the meeting on Wednesday.
If this amendment fails, we will vote to send this or not.
And the amendment is for the meeting on Wednesday.
The motion is to not address this at this meeting this evening. We haven't set a date, or we've talked about a date at the time, just trying to feel the assembly when they available. So we have a no vote.
And I am voting.
Clerk, call the roll.
Sorry.
Okay, so Bob voted no, and this is just simply to postpone the action to a special meeting.
It's to not address it this evening.
To not address it this evening. Jeff?
Yes, I'd like to not address this evening.
Mart?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes. Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe it's a 5-2 vote, and so we won't address this evening, and my intentions are to call a meeting for Wednesday morning, since we have to have the 24-hour notice, unless we call it for 10 o'clock tomorrow night. May as well keep on a roll. So anyway, with that being said, we're on to the next agenda item. The way I understand it, correct, Clerk Thompson?
There a motion on the table didn't get voted on.
Well, let's see.
Okay.
What motion would that be?
My second.
You're right. It didn't get voted on.
My second amendment to your letter didn't get voted on.
Which is leaving the public, commercial and non-commercial. Sorry.
It didn't get voted on that?
No, we didn't vote on it. Member Mucci made changes to it, which I agree with.
Okay, so we have to back up here, folks. We're still on this, but we won't address this evening. Member Lynn had a motion on the table to change language on the second page in the third sentence, and was to add right after public access, commercial and non-commercial access. So,
Mr. Mayor, it would say public, commercial,
non-commercial,
and non-commercial.
Got it.
Yes.
She would put the language in there correctly. So, any other discussion? Any discussion on that proposed amendment to this document? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mart?
Yes. Okay, so we're on to the next agenda item. Excuse me. SEPA 2021 board member and alternate appointments. We asked for letters of interest. Petersburg will hold one voting member seat and one alternate seat on the SEPA board in 2021. SEPA has requested notice of Petersburg's appointments by December 1st. 2 letters of interest were received by the date of publishing this agenda. One from Utility Director Carl Hagerman and one from Assembly Member Bob Lynn. With approval of the Assembly, I would like to appoint Member Bob Lynn as the voting member and Carl Hagerman as the alternate.
Second.
Is there any objection?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Seeing none, that will be the appointments for this year. Excuse me. I cough when I get tired. Okay, communications. There's a list of communications, and there's quite a few listed that were received too late to be on last meeting's agenda. So here they all are. They're on our website. You can access them there. Assembly discussion items. There's Manager Giesbrick's performance evaluation. This was asked for by Member Mucci, so Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted the public to know that we did have an executive session after the last meeting, and we're pretty happy with Steve's work. And we have his performance evaluation, which is a public document, and that will be somewhere that somebody might wants to see it. But overall, we're pretty excited about his job, and we kind of went over it at length for a while. But yeah, we're pretty happy with Steve. He's doing a great job.
Okay, any other addition to that discussion? Member Norton?
I think we all agreed that he did spend an appropriate amount of time in the public.
Well, yeah, but overall, his performance evaluation was very good, and so we move forward with that. Any other discussion on this discussion item? Okay, Assembly member comments. Are there any comments? Okay, I'll make a comment. I intend to call for a special meeting to address this letter to the Energy Committee hearing. So I'm going to call for a special meeting Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. So any other Assembly member comments? Entertain a motion. Oh, recognitions. Anybody have any recognitions? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one recognition, and I just wanted to thank the Southeast Alaska Regional Health Consortium for doing the free testing up at their facility by the gas station. And it's pretty simple. You just drive up, fill out a form, do it online on your phone, and it's real simple to do. And it seems like people are taking advantage of it. It's free, and you get your results in about a week. So I want to thank them for doing that.
One other comment, I guess, comment. If a person of the public is interested in sending an email within time to have it run into the record at that energy meeting on Wednesday the 18th, if you contact Clerk Thompson, or maybe she'll post it on our website, the recommendation from our lobbyist how to get your email read.
Yes, I will ask someone to post it on the website tomorrow morning.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know this is all short notice. Any other comments? Entertain a motion or recognitions? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
Or wait. Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting's adjourned. Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
We didn't break our old record, but we tried.
Thanks.